So she.
Well, how did she get to be such a good Mormon?
She was never a Mormon.
Well, I thought she was a Mormon.
No, never. Aunt Bessie was
Or Aunt
Fanny was absolutely not a Mormon, but everybody said she was the best Mormon there ever was, except in name only, you know.
Okay, so she didn't actually join the church.
She
but
never
she lived
joined
in
the
Ammon
church.
and
She
gardened and made the
And
quilts.
she was Aunt Fanny, and she went to Relief Society, and she did everything, but she never, or I don't know whether she went to Relief Society, I'm sure she did. But everybody in Ammon loved Fanny Curtis.
Well, did she ever actually have a job?
No, not until the World War II came along.
And then she cooked in the schools, right?
Well, she worked to the schools, and she worked for the WPA, making mattresses and clothing, you know, that was the relief program, because she was very, very poor by that time. But she actually got a job at Cress's department store when she was an older lady. And we used to, when we were little, we'd go downtown and say hi to Aunt Fanny. And she was a clerk, and she was very straight-laced and very proper. And she was just heartbroken when she turned 65 when they told her she couldn't work anymore.
I remember going to Aunt Fanny's house. I definitely remember going to Aunt Fanny's house. Now, out in Ammon, and it had the tall, at least to me was tall, because I was very small, and it had the tall narrow windows,
right?
And the lace curtains and the blind, and I could remember standing by that window and looking out. And I definitely know I was at Aunt Fanny's house. So how old was I?
Well, you had to have been 5 years old, between 4 and 5, because weren't they killed in 1950 or 1951? 1950. You're very small.
So I was, 4 years old or less. So, but I remember very, very definitely.
Well, I remember when we had that little Ford, and you were just a little, very small child, right? We went out and visited Aunt Fanny. Mm-hmm. And that was just shortly before she was killed. Because you were a little girl, and we had a car, and we felt rich and able to get out and do things, so we drove out to Ammon and visited her.
I don't remember Aunt Fanny, but I remember her house. Mm-hmm. I have that visual in my mind. I can see the blind, I can see the long window, and I can see the curtains and looking out. And it seems to me that it was not green grass, it was brown grass. Mm-hmm. When I looked out. I don't remember snow, but I remember it being either spring or fall because it was
Well, she had the little fence in front with a little boardwalk that went up to the house, mm-hmm. and up the steps and into the house. And then there was grass on either side, which they flood irrigated. And then she had those lots in Ammon were
and she had a picket fence, and she had flower beds.
Right. It's true.
Yeah, that part that's the only real visual memory I have of Aunt Fanny, and I'm sure she was there, but I don't really remember her. I don't remember much about that at all. So
right,
that's and I have an impression of Margaret, but I can't tell you I really remember anything other than an impression of her. Now, was she around when I was around,
I don't
or
think
is that's something that I'm just thinking?
I think you're just thinking that because she had been sent to Nampa before she has cerebral palsy, very, very severe case, and I think it affected her mind because she was so frustrated, and she got kind of violent there, and Aunt Fanny couldn't handle her anymore, so they took her over there. But that would have been probably before
I was born?
Yeah.
Okay, well.
Or about the time you were born, maybe when you were a small child.
I'm not sure
what the memory is. She was over there quite a while because they went over to visit her a lot of times, and I remember Aunt Fanny making dresses and things to send to her, aprons, and they used to dress them in long dresses with an apron tied in front of them. What they called a.
But how old was she when she went over there? She was a grown woman, wasn't she?
She was a grown woman then, yes, she was. But she just couldn't take care of her anymore. In fact, you go out and look on her headstone, I think she was probably dead. She died before Fanny did. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure about that.
I'm not sure about that.
Somewhere I've read that she died in 1960.
That
1964.
That sounds right. That the boys used to go visit her, but Paul and Jean. But
I don't know why. I don't know what impression in my mind why I have this and it's real vague and I don't know who it is. I thought it was of Margaret, but it's a bed and there's kind of in a room and it's dark and it's a blondish person and there's big quilts and they're kind of an orangey tan. And I just have that impression, but I don't know who it is. See,
That isn't her because Margaret was very dark.
Okay,
She
no.
had dark hair and she looked very much, if I would have to say who did she look like Margaret Yo. She had the dark hair and the large eyes and she looked.
Yeah, no, that's not who the impression is I have in my memory then, but I remember someone being in their bed, you know, and that's, I wasn't a very.
Will the dogs sure be on the TV too?
Oh, they're going to be all over it, I'm sure.
Well, Uncle Andy, how did he turn into a farmer, from a rancher to a farmer? Did he do anything in
Well,
between
he was
time?
just like Dad. He used to work as a cook and gambler, bartender. I mean, everybody worked at whatever they could work at in those days. Hired hand, cook at a sheep shearing place or a mine or anything like that. But when he came back and he bought that little house, that little piece of property out at the end of 25th, of the Boulevard on 25th, wherever it is, you know, out there, and he farmed it, and then he got on. Of course, he lived next door to the Roses, who owned Roger Brothers, and he started working for Roger Brothers. Thank God, because they nearly starved to death before. He was trying to raise pigs and chickens and.
Well, he got married fairly young, though, didn't he?
Oh yeah, they were married quite young. He married Eliza Anderson, one of the Andersons.
And immediately had 2 little boys.
Yes, and that was it. They shut it off right then.
So he worked at Roger Brothers and farmed the.
Farmed the 13 acres
Is that
there.
all it was 13 acres?
13 or 14 acres there. He owned from Boulevard clear over to the cemetery, or Topaz Park, you know, along in there. Well, and then where those
And
other
back of the
houses are.
cemetery, yeah,
Right
that
there.
little corner in there.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, because we used to walk clear out to the end and then look over the fence of the cemetery. There used to be a ditch along there, I remember as a child. But he had a great big barn, and he had great big poplar trees around it, and he had lots of chickens. He raised corn and fed the chickens, and they kept pigs, and they kept a cow, and they practically lived off that little. And Liza had a big garden. Everybody had gardens then. She canned and dried food, and you know, he raised a few potatoes, and they.
And then worked at Roger Brothers.
Right, worked at Roger Brothers.
Until they could finally subdivide and sell the lot and have money.
They're rich, yeah. They got they did. They did very well.
But that was much later in life.
That's much later in life, and that was the most terrible feeling of unhappiness and resentment between Aunt Bessie and Aunt Lize. See, Aunt Lize, they had the Sundbergs, who they were close friends with. The old man Sundberg, and he said, "Hey, don't just sell this property, you know, en masse. We'll subdivide it." And he helped him plat it out and build all those lots, those fancy houses.
Well, it was called the Kiefer Edition.
Yeah, right. And they sold the lots one at a time. He didn't sell them all at once because he didn't want to, for the tax
Implications.
yeah. So they would sell them as they needed them and build all those nice homes out there. So he bought him a little Ford, or a little, what was that little car, a little Valiant?
Yeah, I remember.
He got the little new car, and then Grandpa and him would go fishing every day and take John out of school. That's why John failed school.
And then they used to just drive up in the hills and they'd send John down. He was just a kid, 6, 7, 8 years old. They'd send him down to throw rocks in the Willow Creek, and they'd sit up there and drink beer and get drunk. And that's one of the reasons why John never made it in school. True story, isn't it?
Absolutely true story. He said he knew every inch of Willow Creek, and out at Point Springs, out by Mud Lake, and up at Swan Valley, and Andy was a terrible driver. He never driven a car hardly in his whole life. They lived out on 25th Street on South Boulevard, and they never owned a car until I bought that little valley under whatever
Well, and
it
that
was.
had to be in the late 50s or the early
Yeah.
60s.
Aunt Liz walked to town every time she needed to go to town, which was probably 2 or 3 times a week. She had her groceries delivered, but she'd walk clear to town. She had her laundry picked up. She never did laundry. She said she was above washing. She didn't wash. Of course, we used to have the White Star Laundry here in Idaho Falls that would do people's laundry for them that didn't have washing machines. But she always, even in the worst of depression, and when they had to they even had their electricity shut off, and he went to work for the city to pay up their electricity bill. They had oil lamps and burnt wood, but she would never go to work, and she would never do laundry.
Well, isn't her parents' house on 13th Street the one that
Yes.
Ed and Kay bought?
And he was the county commissioner. He had a big ranch out east of Idaho Falls. A.C. Anderson, he was quite a pillar of society then, pillar of the town. Of course, they were good Mormons, see. But Aunt Liz was just a little bit above the Kiefers.
Well, what in the hell did she marry Ann?
I don't know, they fought from day one. They fought right up to the day they died, and then she had the nerve to have him sealed to her in the temple.
And she went right back to the Mormon church, right back to the Mormon church.
Well, she went to the Mormon church all the time, yeah.
Because when I went to her funeral, I couldn't believe how Mormon it was. I'm just,
Dave
oh my
Watkins,
God.
remember?
That was quite the funeral. But well, what I remember about Aunt Liz when I was growing up is her house was always meticulous and absolutely the epitome of little old ladyhood. I used to take you there when you were
Pink
little.
carpets and lace tablecloths and
Lots of knickknacks.
Flower, artificial flowers, and a little crocheted doilies on everything.
But
She was a wonderful cook
yeah,
and
I
a
used to
wonderful
like
housekeeper.
I liked her dill pickles, but I took you there as a child several times when you were just a toddler. And of course I used to just kind of hover over you because I was always afraid you were going to touch one of those doilies or one of those knickknacks. But
And she and Andy just fought all the time. But see, after they got money, then the first thing they did with that little old farmhouse is they put a bathroom in it. They never even had a bathroom. They had an outside toilet, and they did have water. They had a pump and water in the sink, but it just drained outside. They didn't even have a cesspool or anything. But she got a bathroom, and they got hooked up to the sewer there on 25th Street. And then she built that addition on the front where she built the living room with the big picture window in it. And they actually before they just had an old heater and a coal wood cook stove in the kitchen, and she got a furnace put in. And they were very careful with their money, and they did things very judiciously. They didn't do everything all at once.
well, wasn't the living room extended rather than put on?
Yes.
Because I remember a smaller living room and then the larger living room with
Yeah.
the picture window. And I could remember as you came in the house, you had the living room and the kitchen was at the back, and there was a kind of a little storage side room
Yeah.
to the left, and the bedroom was through the living room
Yes,
to the right.
to the right, yeah. You had to go
And-
through the living room, around to the bedroom.
Around to the
Then there was a
bedroom.
little tiny bedroom that was just off the kitchen there, a little lean-to type that was very cold, very unheated. That was really a cold little room. People used to build those. But remember going out on the back porch, there was the little back porch, and there was the cellar door. You could go down into the
Go
cellar.
down to the cellar door. We'll
Uh-huh.
go by there and take a picture of the house.
Well, it's all changed now.
Oh
They've
yeah,
all
it's changed.
it.
Because the
And
people
then you
that-
could walk out to the big barn and the wood chopping block and the big poplar trees. I can see it all. Of course, I have this memory where I can remember everything. And the driveway came around the house and around to the back.
Well, what did Andy do for all the years? Then he just kind of farmed that little 13 acres.
Uh-huh.
That was his
That was
job.
it.
That and working at Roger
Working at
Brothers.
Roger Brothers or tending bar once in a while, or working as a cook or a cook's helper. Kind of like all the rest of the Kiefers. None of them ever really aspired to anything great.
Not our side of the family. We're not the side that
No.
they remember.
No, not the lawyers and the judges and the civil engineers and the things like the other Kiefers.
Well, so tell me about Bessie. Bessie lost her mother, and then she lost her sister, and she wasn't really old enough to help raise kids on the ranch. She was more one of the kids being raised, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was up there though. She was, if you'll read in those little diaries, she talks about, she went to high school.
So she was probably one of the more educated ones.
Well, yes, and my dad, I guess, was very intelligent and would have been very, but when, see, he had his accident when he was 15, 16, and never went back to school. And he was in 9th grade when that happened. And he never went back to school after that. Of course, I guess his health was poor, and he had a couple more operations on the stump of his leg until he got fitted with
Tell us about let's talk about Aunt Bessie a little bit. So she got married fairly young though, didn't she?
not too young.
Well, what did she do from the time she was about 16 till
She got
was
a
about...
job.
A job?
A job. Yes. You've got that album of Sue's where she's sitting at the desk typing.
Mm-hmm.
She taught herself bookkeeping and typing and shorthand out of a book. She never went to any kind of a secretarial school, but she got a job. She's worked for different titles alone, and then she went to work for Sundberg's. See, Sue inherited her job.
Yes, I knew Sue inherited the job. When Bessie got ready to retire, she turned the job over to Sue.
She worked for the Clem Sundberg, the Sundberg and Sundberg Associates, architectures.
And she was a working lady back before there
Ever was working ladies.
Well, who raised her kids?
Well, I think she really actually went to work more when June was old enough to go to school, and then after that, when she had Sue, I guess she just kind of winged it. Grandpa or Dude used to work as a bartender and a cook, and a lot of times he'd work later afternoon. I don't know. She just kind of. And then I remember one time she had when they lived in that little house up on Canal Street, and they moved there when Sue was 6 years old. She said she remembers that. And they had a lady that lived with them. She was an older lady, and her name was Mrs. Quinn. She was related to the Quinns that owned Heisey, and she rented the room, and Bess and Dude moved into June's room and put June and Sue down the basement, into the basement, or out on the back porch, the sleeping porch, and they needed the income, and then I think she kind of helped look after the kids too.
Well, how many places did Bessie live? I mean, they started out down there on Chamberlain, didn't they?
No, they started out on that little house on 17th Street that I showed you. That's where she was. And then for some reason they gave that up, and I don't know why, whether they sold it or whether they lost it or what, but then they moved into the apartment over on 403 Chamberlain Avenue. That's where Sue was born.
Well, yeah, but they'd been married about 12 years when that happened.
But in that meantime, they'd taken this big flying trip clear to California in the Model T Ford too.
Well, that's when they went all the way to California,
To the
back
ocean.
in a Model A or a Model T, and it took them, what, a month?
Oh, it took them longer than that. It was all summer. They went with this group of people, and there's pictures of them in the album.
It took them 3 days to get to Twin Falls.
We had to change your tires a lot, and patch them, and you know.
And then wind up in Twin Falls.
Yeah, well, the roads were terrible then.
Well,
Sure they were
Sue would have been born in 1927, so this was before Sue was born, so
Yes.
this was the early 20s.
Well, that was probably during the time when everybody was going broke here. They decided maybe they could go down there and do better.
Well, and I'm sure Uncle Grant was down there.
Yeah, Uncle Grant was down there, and they loaded the baby in the car, or June in the car, and they tied the sleeping bags on the
Running board.
and their little tent, and their pots and pans, and they took off for California. And there's a whole group of them did it.
Them and the Okies, huh?
Well, it was before the Okies. It was still quite affluent then. You can see from those pictures of Bessie standing in front of the palm tree and everything. It was pretty nice then, but that was before but it was the beginning of the Depression and the gold dust and so forth. Because you can see in the pictures that June's probably 6 or 7 years old. She was born in probably 1917. She'd be the same age as Pee Wee. There was all those kids that were the same age as the family. There was Margaret and Richard were little kids, and Jack and Stan were little kids, and June was one of the children. So the rest of us didn't come along till later.
Yeah, that was the first crop.
Yeah, the first crop of
go
kids.
around.
Yeah. That was true.
But Bess and Dude took off and
Mm-hmm.
went to California in their Model T for fame.
Adventure. Yeah, they were gonna go down there and join the, the gold rush or whatever. But they came back, and then they moved in at Bid Elch's apartment there. See, that, like I say, the Elches and the Kiefers are all very entwined throughout our lives.
Mm-hmm.
She moved, and they moved next door. That'd be kind of uncomfortable. Her old boyfriend and
Or at least her old boyfriend's mother or sister.
yes, no, it was his wife. Eddie Elch was Bessie's little boyfriend when they were growing up.
Oh, well, anyway.
But she got over that. He worked for the fire department. He was one of the firemen. He got on one of those plush jobs and retired from the fire department. So they always had money. People who had a good job then, they stuck with it, boy. If you had a job, you were somebody.
Well, what was Dude doing those days? Was he too trying to bartend, or did he ever do anything besides bartend?
He tended bar and cooked, and that's about it.
But he came from a strict Mormon family.
I know it. He moved up here to get away from him.
Oh, he did, huh? He was the...
He was the youngest of 8 girls, I think.
Well, I've got a picture of that family.
Oh, yeah.
Their names were Burnthorpe or Burnhope or...
That's his name,
Burnhope, yeah.
Mhm.
Something like that, and he didn't want... He didn't want to play, huh?
R.B. Manson, Robert Bernhardt, yeah. He didn't want to play with all those girls in the Mormon church. He left.
But, from what I can see of the scrapbooks, they didn't sever ties with the Burnhopes.
No,
I mean,
they didn't.
went back and...
Oh, yes.
And
Sue remembers her grandmother.
and spending time with those people, so
Down in Utah, Payson, Utah.
so that there was quite a bit of, he may have not joined the religious part of the family, but he did keep,
And of course, if you notice all throughout the history of the Kiefers, anybody that was a Mormon that married into the Kiefers, a lot of them lost their religion, like Mother and Dude. Now Liza hung on to her. She stayed right with it. In fact, like I said, she had poor old Uncle Andy sealed to her after he was dead when he couldn't say anything about it. Soon I thought that was really bad.
well, it's his choice.
He was like the rest of the Kiefers. Mormon was always preceded by damn,
Well, that's because the biggest thing that great-grandpa Jake, when we said he was a federal marshal out here, or a federal deputy, that was he was supposed to watch the Indians, but he was supposed to watch the Mormons. And he got didn't he get a bounty for every polygamist he found, or something like that?
That passed through the ranch. Because a lot of them would take that back road up through the Kiefer Ranch and on up the Skyline Way to Swan Valley and Star Valley, and they go through the hills, through the old roads.
And that was like a choke point or a checkpoint, or?
Yeah, and he was supposed to report them when they went through with their 6 wives and 22 kids.
And that he got a bounty for each one of them. So that was part of his being a federal marshal, was to monitor the Mormons.
Well, and also at that time they didn't want any Mormons voting, and they passed a law. Passed a law in Idaho that if you belonged to the Mormon church, you couldn't vote.
Yeah, that's true. That went on for a long time.
And so he had to make sure that there was no Mormons voting.
You're such a good dog.
She just wanted to be with us. And see, here's Rudy right down here.
Mm-hmm.
And we have Grandpa's formal picture of him like that, don't we?
I think we do somewhere.
Yeah. Those are the cooks of the...
Well, let's work up to that. Let's talk about the Kiefer Ranch first.
Okay, I don't know any of the, I'm gonna get you telling the story, Grandma. We'll put the pictures in later. What we do is we'll scan the pictures so we can see them rather than it doesn't work for me to try to take a picture of a picture.
Oh, okay.
So, what I would do is, like I said, the history is the cool part is hearing the stories, and then later on we can scan these pictures in the computer, and I can make
Well-
like an album for people.
Well, where did, tell me when you're ready.
We're ready.
Okay, where did he originally get the Kiefer Ranch? Did he homestead it? or-
Homesteaded
He
it.
homesteaded it.
Yes.
And how big was it?
Well, according to Dad, it was 6,000 acres.
6,000 acres.
But it wasn't all homestead. I mean, he got it on, back then you could get grazing rights and then you could convert them into ownership. And I imagine he bought some, you know, paid some money for some of the money, the land that was there. But it was the whole valley, you know, the Willow Creek ran through it. And the lower part of the ranch now is covered by the Rowry Dam. But
the upper part is owned by Art.
but my dad said as a little boy or a young boy, they could start right at the top of the house, where the house was in the upper end of the little valley, and they could walk all around the fence line, and it took them all day to go all clear around. Of course, I don't know if that was stopping to throw rocks or fight or have lunch or what, but they could walk the whole perimeter of the ranch in one day. And it was the ranch went up the sides of the mountains too. It wasn't all flat.
So there was a little bit of timber then?
There was timber, there was sagebrush, there was grazing land, there was irrigation. They had a little dam on the creek. They had water rights, so they could make ditches, and they cultivated hay and grain, and they had horses, and they had some cattle, not too many cattle, but they had a lot of sheep.
So they had mostly sheep and horses then,
Right.
that they raised in.
And they moved the horses or the sheep around the different areas of the ranch, and then up onto they had grazing rights above the ranch too. So, I mean, because Dad always talked about being over on Black Mountain and being over such and such a ridge and so forth with the sheep. And of course, when the kids were old enough, then they had to take their turn with the sheep. But
So he started getting his water rights in 1882.
1882, right. And I think Hal went down to the records and pulled a sheet out that shows that he had the water rights for that whole area.
Well, tell me about this great little house that he built this
Well, the house was supposed to be a temporary house, and it was 3 rooms. And the back room was a lean-to. I mean, there was two main rooms, the living room and the kitchen type, and the back was kind of a lean-to where the kids all slept with, and it even had part of it had a dirt floor in it. And it was made of, as you can see, it was made of logs and brush and daub and so forth. But inside, they said it was, you know, fairly livable and comfortable.
What did they put on the roof here?
I think that was just sod, but looks like the vegetation has taken root and grown on it too. Probably branches and sagebrush and stuff that they piled up there to keep the sun and the wind and the rain and the snow off of it.
Well, did these 3 rooms had what, a center porch? Is that how that worked?
The center porch, evidently the porch comes out,
Okay.
but they did lots of poker playing on the porch, and eating and so forth. Remember, this was really designed to be a year-round ranch. They came down to Idaho Falls in the wintertime.
Even at first?
Most of the time, I think when Grandma was alive, they did. As the kids got older and got out of school, why then sometimes there was one Christmas that Dad said he and Andy stayed up there all winter with the cattle and the horses and the sheep. I think they brought down to Ammon or one of the lower elevations, but they stayed up on the ranch all. They never saw a soul. And that was the winter that he said all he got for Christmas was a jar of chokecherry jelly from Mrs. Ma Keppinger, who lived down at Kep's Crossing, and a pair of socks. And that was it.
How old was he?
Oh, probably 14. He and Andy was up there for the winter. Grandpa just left him up there. I don't know whether he didn't leave Bessie, I don't think. I think Bessie was down here with Fanny. going to school with little Grant.
But the two boys stayed up there for the winter, huh?
Stayed up there that winter, yes. He said it was a long, cold winter.
And when they stayed for the winter, they stayed for the whole winter because of the Willow Creek.
Well, he said that one time during the winter time, old Jake came up with a sleigh with some provisions for him. And he was quite excited to have fresh food and see Grandpa. And then he turned around and went back to Idaho Falls. Left him till spring.
Well, wasn't there one year he had to throw it across the creek? He couldn't even ford the Willow Creek.
I don't know whether that was that winter or not, but one winter he did.
One winter I remember the story is that he couldn't get across Willow Creek, so he just threw the provisions all across Willow Creek.
Yeah. The whole stack of them.
He just threw them across the Willow Creek.
Kids had to gather them up. They ate lots of soda crackers, lots of canned goods, lots of biscuits and gravy. And they'd go out and kill a sheep once in a while, or for meat, you know, they had to have meat.
Well, tell me about this great soddy that he built. You don't know when he built the soddy then.
I have no idea. But that was obviously the first place. And then, of course, his big plan was to build the big house on the a little further up the hill. And then after Grandma Kiefer died, why then he just things went into decline, and he no longer cared about building the house.
Well, when did he first marry her? Do you know?
Oh, I don't know. Didn't you find their marriage certificate?
Not theirs. I'd have to go back and look. I mean, we'd have to start backtracking from when Lou was born. Lou's the oldest, right?
Lou's the oldest. And according to that picture, he was born, when that picture was taken, it was still called Eagle Rock.
Well, that was 1890.
So he was, I think he, trying to think when.
Well, he was born way before 1890 because
he was born in, I think, 1888, wasn't he?
Well, I'd want to say even before that, because Grandpa was born in 1996, and he was older than 8 years old. Then Andy, and then
Annie Laurie,
and then Bess. And then
Jim, and then Grant.
Okay, and we don't know when the one, like the little baby
I
Helen,
have no idea.
when she was born. But see, I kind of think that Aunt Lou, or Uncle Lou, when we can go check it on his headstone, but I thought he was older than that, because wasn't he a teenager by the time Grandpa was born in 1896?
Oh, yeah. And he was pretty good size. He was.
So we'd have to go back and figure out, I mean, when he actually made the soddy and when he went back and got Margaret and married her, because I'm sure they started having kids fairly soon.
Well, of course, remember, he built the house down on South Capitol, too.
Well, I didn't know anything about the house on South Capitol.
Oh, heavens, yes, that was there. You don't remember that when you were a little girl? I used to point it out to you, but I guess it's been too long. It'd be right where the art museum is now. And it was the first house made out of boards, you know, I mean, instead of being, and painted in Idaho Falls. And it also was a 3-room house. The living room and a kitchen and a bedroom. But he built that and brought her out, and they were married. I don't know whether they were married in Pennsylvania or whether they were married in Idaho Falls, but Uncle Will and Aunt Dora were married in that little house. But I still remember that little house.
Is that where they used to come down for the winters?
They came down for the winter, yes. There was a whole row of houses along Capitol Avenue there, where the park is now, and they were kind of built up on a hill, and they all had stone steps leading up to them, and they were up on the hill, old Victorian houses. And his house was more to the north end of it, not in the nicest section. There was about 10 or 12 houses on South Capitol that were a little fancier than the one that they lived in. Theirs was more primitive.
Well, what was he married before Uncle Will then?
Yes.
He was definitely married before Uncle Will, even though he was the younger of the
Yes,
two.
that's true.
Well, that's interesting to know.
But we could always check that out too if we had to.
Well, that would be interesting to go back and to see. So that's why I think that, and we can check the birth dates on Uncle Lou, but I think that I think Lou and Fanny and Andy, weren't they all born before 1890?
Well, I know the picture that picture says Eagle Rock, Idaho on it. So,
Well, Eagle Rock, Idaho was 1890. Did you know that?
well, then they were all
In
born.
18, because see, I know that from being in the
Yeah.
museum where I was working.
That
down
sounds
in
about
Eagle
right,
Rock.
Laurel.
In
Because
18,
if,
yeah, in 1890,
Yeah.
1891, the name was changed to Idaho Falls. So if it says Eagle Rock on that picture, they were all born before 1890. Because that's when the name was officially changed from Eagle Rock to Idaho
I'll
Falls.
have to look find out.
Question.
They
In
could have been.
1890, so it would have had to have been a lot sooner than that, because the other kids are older in his family, it would have had for them to have gotten married. Of course, I don't know how fast Aunt Dora had all those kids, but aren't Phil and Louise and all of them all older than? Weren't Phil and Frank, or I mean Frank and Fred, the very last of that family?
No, they weren't.
Oh, they weren't.
No, they weren't. Irene and gosh, they had Clyde Kiefer real late in life. He was a change of life baby.
Right, but I know because that's one of the things for me working in the museum that Fred and Frank were born in 1890.
Okay.
And so all the other kids of the marriage of Uncle Will would have, if it took place in Grandma and Grandpa's house, had to have happened a lot sooner than that.
I think Fred and Frank were the second of the oldest in the family.
Well, who's the oldest? Phil's
the oldest.
Phil's the oldest.
And then they had the twins.
Well, didn't they have the two girls though?
They had 3 girls.
Okay. They had Ruby
Mm-hmm.
and Dot
And Louise.
and Louise.
And then they had Clyde.
And then they had Clyde.
But Louise and Dot were younger. They were.
Okay,
Yeah.
but wasn't Ruby like Phil? Wasn't she older than the twins?
She was probably right in there somewhere.
Uh-huh.
I have no idea because she married a man named Mr. Brace and moved to California, and we never
Right.
heard much about it.
Well, we got that one letter is all. But, well, I'd like to go back and find, because it sounds to me like Jake really came out and established himself both on the ranch and in the farm. If he got his first water rights in 1882, he was well on his way in his 1880s of getting that all established.
Oh yeah, he was.
And we don't know when he went back and married Margaret, do we?
No. I have no idea.
No.
But sometime in the 80s, of course, you'd have to.
And then they started having kids and establishing their way.
Yes, and there was, they said there was a couple other babies in there, and we don't know if they were first babies or last babies. But see, she was in her 40s when she died, and she was pregnant with her last child. They said she was 5 or 6 months pregnant. What was she, 44?
About that, yeah.
On her headstone. She died in 1904.
Mm-hmm.
See, Dad was what?
He'd have been 8 years old,
Yeah.
7 or 8 years old. And then Grant was younger.
Yeah, he was younger.
So whether, at what point she had other kids is the thing
Yeah,
that
we'll never know.
We have no way of knowing. Well, did they live in this little soddy in the summers when they went up there?
Of course. And the sheep camps and all over the ranch.
Did he ever make a go of the ranch?
Probably not. He made a living, but not. They were always going to strike oil or strike gold, or the market was going to get better, or the price of sheep was going to go up. And nobody ever really made money back there until they became mechanized, like the Sweeters and the Schluters and all those people that came in later and bought up all those ranches for taxes or whatever, and then they had huge combines and modern equipment, and then they could make a living. But you couldn't make a living back in those days. It was too labor intensive. They'd bring the sheep down to
Mm-hmm.
the stockyards and sell them, and they'd have cattle drives. They had, I guess they raised cattle too, but mostly sheep. Sheep were
Any reason why sheep rather than cattle?
they were easier to take care of. Cattle are very iffy. They die real easy. Sheep breed rapidly and
Do better.
besides you can get the wool crop, and remember back in those days everything was made out of wool.
Yeah.
That's why you raise sheep, is for the wool. Not especially for the meat.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
They had sheep shearing and dipping, and then they'd bring the bales of sheep down, and I'm sure they had the itinerant sheep shearers that went around and did flocks of sheep, just like they did in Australia later.
Well, what else do you know about the ranch up there besides the fact that he was trying to build a better house up there? It was called what, a four square?
Four square house, yeah. And then 4 rooms,
2 stories.
2 stories.
And then he quit when Grandma died, and that was it.
Yeah, that was it. He never finished it. Just kind of lost heart. He never married after that, although they said he did court several widows. But
And fool around a little.
yeah, right. But
Well, when did he really start becoming, less than a stalwart citizen?
well, I guess when he lost the ranch. After all, after the world, the war.
World War One.
World War I, and when they had a big drought in the 20s, and a lot of the people couldn't make their payments or couldn't make their taxes, so they just let the country go back. And then you could go and buy up land for nothing, just like our other grandparents did at DeLynn. They just abandoned it and walked off and left it.
Is that what they did in DeLynn?
Yep. They had 4 or 5 bad crop years in the 20s, and the price of wheat went down to nothing. You couldn't even make it, and especially when you were doing it with a horse and wagon and horse-pulled thrashers.
Well, then what did Jake do? He came down to town and played cards and drank and lived in a sheep camp? Or?
Right. He ended up his life in a sheep camp and as a night watchman for one of those potato houses over on the west side. That gave him a little money, and and actually he ended up probably on the county.
Did he have any other jobs besides the night watchman after he quit ranching?
Not that I know of.
The only other thing
He was a
did.
gentleman. He was a gentleman. Former businessman and former rancher.
Played cards.
Played cards. Went to the Elks Club, and
What did he use for income?
I imagine he got a little bit of money for being a night watchman. That's all I can figure out.
Well, didn't he get into a fight one time with B.M. Rogers and shoot him in the arm?
Well, he used to shill a little bit, and play poker and make money that way, but he was sort of a ne'er-do-well.
Well, tell me about the fight where he pulled out the gun.
Well, they say that's how B.M. Rogers got part of the ranch, was that he pulled out the gun and they were fighting over cards, and he shot him right through the palm of his hand.
And Mr. Rogers was cranky?
Very cranky. So he ended up with part of Grandpa's ranch. I don't know whether he got it all or what happened. Maybe that was the $93 that he borrowed to pay the fines. Who knows?
Well, actually, the piece of paper I saw that showed that he borrowed $93 and then defaulted on it, with his brother having to pay it was early on. It was in the 1890s. So, but he shot him in the hand. But he didn't have to go to jail, right?
No.
They worked it out.
They worked it out between them. Sort of a land swap situation.
So that ended. That's why we're not landowners. Isn't
Probably. It probably contributed to it.
it? Does he have other little stories where he got in trouble?
Well, he had a saloon down on Eagle Rock Street. I don't know too much about that, but that was way back. That was
early on.
real early on.
He used to run that while he actually had the ranch, didn't he?
I guess he did, yeah. Of course, anybody could open a saloon. All you needed is a barrel of whiskey and a counter and a door.
Not real big on the regulations.
No, nobody really cared much.
He obviously didn't make a real success of that either.
No, he really didn't. In the meantime, his brother was busy building a big, beautiful house on North Ridge Avenue and having his kids and becoming the
Founding father.
stalwart citizen of Idaho Falls.
And yet Jake actually came out sooner
Yes,
and established himself long
Right.
before
right,
William did.
yeah, right. He actually, they brought out their sister too.
Mary.
Mm-hmm.
But she went back, didn't she?
No, she lived here for a long time. In fact, her and her husband owned a whole block of, where the R&G Jewelers used to be on the corner.
Mm-hmm.
They owned that whole block and where that hardware store is. And at one time they were pretty well to do, but evidently after Grandma died, there was just nobody to look after all the poor little orphan kids, and Aunt Dora and Aunt Mary kind of stepped in and helped when they could,
Mm-hmm.
give the girls advice. And
Do you know what Mary's last name was?
oh hell, I wish I could remember. It'll come to me, but I can't think of it now.
And what did she finally, and then they what?
And they left here.
They finally bailed out. You know when?
I have no idea. See, Sue could answer all these questions, but I can't. So,
So
but
she
anyway,
sold her property and bailed out, huh?
evidently she did.
But there weren't any kids of that marriage, were there?
Yes, I think there were. I'm trying to think what her name was. Dad had cousins all over. He really did. He had cousins back in Pennsylvania, Elmer, and had children, and Grant had children.
Well, Elmer came out here for a while too.
Yes, he
didn't
did.
And how long? Now, where did he fit in?
He ended up going to California.
Mm-hmm. Was he older or younger?
I think he was younger.
Younger. Okay.
I think Jake was probably the oldest in the family, or one of the oldest.
I thought William was the oldest.
Well, yeah, that's true. He was, but not by very much.
Okay, you
a
had
year and a
William,
half
and then
or-
who knows where Mary fit, and then Jake.
And Elmer was in there somewhere, and then Grant was the baby.
Well, he's the one that stayed behind to run the store, wasn't
And
he?
take care of the grandmother. He was also a baby born real late in life to Grandma Kiefer.
Mm-hmm. But he stayed to take care of the
In
old.
fact, he lived a long, long time. He lived way up into the 1950s or 60s.
Yeah.
He lived a lot longer than anybody ever expected him to.
Well, what do you know? So Mary was here, and she had kids, but you can't think of her name, huh?
No, but I'll think of it someday.
Well, that'd be good to know. I mean, she was your aunt.
No, she was my great aunt.
Okay, great aunt.
Mhm.
I take that back. Great aunt. Okay, well, tell me about Elmer. What do you know about Elmer?
Well, I don't know. Very little about Elmer Kiefer. He just didn't like it here, and so he went on.
He was only here a year or two.
Right.
The reason I know was here for a while, is because, you know, when you go down to the library and they have those flip-flop pages where you can look at things, there's a dinner invitation in there from the Kiefers, and it lists Elmer's name.
Who was the host? Dora and William?
I think it was Dora and William. I really do.
Was Grandpa and Margaret invited? Or?
Well, they may have been invited, but I don't think they're the ones that put the party on.
Okay.
But it talked about Elmer Kiefer also. That's why I was curious. But that's down in the library. And
So in some of those old early scrapbooks, isn't there any mention of the Elmer and Mary?
well, I'll have to go back and read the diaries that Bessie wrote. Those I don't know, because I've never sat and really digested all of those. The scrapbooks themselves, this one we're looking at is probably the oldest. And from there on they get, you know, there's a lot of them that happened during the war. You can tell are more wartime. My suspicions is that Bessie had lots of other scrapbooks that have gone south, you know, that just aren't
aren't are around here or anything. But anyway, let's get back to talking about Jake and Margaret and all of that kind of stuff. So this picture obviously is when they were looking for oil. When they're looking for, these are the officials that came out to help them. Well, this is in town.
True. Now, B.M. Rogers and Bill Rogers and the Kiefers had a lot of connection. And, of course, they went up and started that Muldoon mine. They had a mine up there.
At Muldoon?
Hal can tell you a lot about that. But I know that they always said that Grandma Kiefer invested very heavily into this mine. And that's probably why he lost his ranch. But they always said that Aunt Fanny, in her trunk, had all these worthless stock certificates for this mine. And I don't know whatever happened to those stock certificates for the mine up at Muldoon.
Which is still running.
Yeah.
Too bad we don't have the stock certificates. Well, it sounds like that we just missed out on our inheritance.
I was gonna say the history of this family didn't do worth a shit at keeping their money, did they?
Oh no, there's
There's never been a Kiefer that was smart enough to get rich. None of us.
well.
Okay,
That's,
take a pause. Everybody take a breath.
I don't seem to be all right. And, you know, she'd make sure I'd wash my hands and all that.
Oh, yeah.
On her piano. And a guy came over to tune it up one time with her, and that fascinated the hell out of me.
Yeah, you were more interested in the workings when he
Yeah.
propped it up.
Yeah, the big goddamn thing, and you put a pole under it,
yeah.
and this guy put his ear down there, and then he had
His little hammers and little
bing, you know, and all this, and he'd run around and
tighten the
tune it.
strings, right?
Jesus, that was fascinating.
Yeah. She used to have her piano tuned.
well, how did she wear butcher paper for aprons?
Well, she'd take this goddamn, I don't know how in the hell she'd strap it on some old way to cover up so she wouldn't get anything on her,
On her dress.
on her dress. And she used butcher paper instead of an apron, you know.
She didn't like to iron.
No,
I don't think
and-
she ever did
I
laundry.
don't think so. And you know, and then the rugs, Laurel, when you walked in the place, she had,
Oriental rugs.
yeah, but you could never see them because she had all these, what do you call them, runners.
Oh, yeah,
over
she had the plastic runners
everywhere
over the
you
top.
went. And when she ran out of runners, she put down that goddamn butcher paper. And that'd be out towards the front. Nobody ever came in the front. I never knew of anybody that ever came in the front of her.
Well, occasionally when she had a lilac tea, why she
Oh.
did that. Remember she
Her
had the lilac tea?
Yeah, yeah.
And she'd have
Yeah,
it.
I remember.
Oh, God.
Lilac tea, yeah.
And she'd have Mrs. Bachman and Anne Marie and I would entertain. I'd give a reading and Anne Marie would sing, and accompanied by the piano. And she sang my sweet little Alice blue gown, and I had a blue gown too. I had to wear my blue gown too. But I gave readings. I gave Anne of Green Gables.
Well, isn't she the one that sent you off for elocution lessons?
Oh yes,
Oh, yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep, I took elocution lessons from, when I was just a little kid.
Elocution.
She thought she said she thought that I could have been an actress if I'd have, if they-
Applied.
yes,
Yeah.
well, yes, and if I'd been in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
I did, I was good.
Well, no question. And then Keith and Kenneth were the artists, and she's going to turn Hal into a musician.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, she paid him.
No, God, it didn't work on me. I tell you,
Yeah, Keith-
I was kind of interested.
Well,
in
she was a
piano,
good
but
woman. She put,
she wasn't
yeah.
bad. I mean,
Yeah.
you know.
she paid for Keith and Kenneth art lessons with that old Mr. McClure, old Frank McClure.
Yeah.
They'd go down there and draw, and she bought all the materials for them, and like I said,
Give us some culture.
yeah.
What'd she do
Poor
with
little
J-
orphan kids across the street.
What'd she do with JB and Bob? Did she?
Oh, JB wouldn't have anything to do with it.
He didn't like
Uh-uh.
to try, but towards the end, I didn't either.
And Hal, or Bob, she really got on. I mean, Bob washed her whole house, that big two and a half story house, inch by inch, with buckets of soapy water, and then rinsed it down. When she got through, she gave him the grand total of $15. And he worked, probably a month.
Yeah.
Probably worked hard every day.
How old was he?
Oh, he's about 12 or 14.
And she'd get up on those big tall ladders and with a bucket of hot
You
soapy
got
water
15 bucks for that?
Yeah.
and scrub the house.
Cash money American there, I tell you.
She didn't want to paint it, she just wanted it scrubbed.
She was able to come up.
Keith and Kathy used to dig dandelions. Did you ever dig dandelions for her,
He went
Hal?
outside, I think, to get a beer.
Well, I know they also caddied.
Yeah, oh yes, Hal caddied too. And they'd take turns, one twin one day and one the next. Poor little skinny kids carrying those big 50-pound bags of golf bags, clear around 18 holes of golf.
Did
But
you caddy, Hal?
Hal caddied too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, if you counted for Spencer, you got 75 cents. Everybody else got $1 to walk the 18 holes. But his theory was, and I guess Keith and Gans never mentioned it to him. I mentioned it to him right away that the others would get a little more than that. You know, and their bag that they were carrying wasn't any lighter or heavier than his. But he said, yeah, but that's steady work. You come out here every day,
You don't have, and you get a ride out and a ride back.
Right back.
See,
So that was
We
the
didn't-
end of the conversation. I just said, I guess that's fine. And he'd hit the ball, and he'd say, you see where that ball went? And I'd say, hell no, doctor. Well, what am I paying you for? He'd say. I said, I'd carry the bag.
a good caddy's supposed to watch the ball too.
Say you don't pay me enough.
I never.
Well,
learned
he was good to our family, really.
Oh, he really was. There was nothing wrong with him.
No, when Mother and Dad had Hal, I don't think they ever paid the bill. Never paid him. I think they paid a little bit to the hospital. He was the only one of our family that was born in a hospital.
Born in a hospital, yeah.
But 10 days in the hospital, and Mother and Dad, he just said, "Oh, forget it. That's okay." But
Well, he owned the hospital, didn't he?
yeah, and I think they paid $25 or
Didn't hurt him
something.
too bad.
No.
I mean, you know.
I think they paid the $25 for the hospital bill, but that was it.
He took out my tonsils too. I can still remember
Oh,
that.
yeah.
I didn't
Well,
like that.
He took out mine too.
Yeah, but
and
the
after he
son
died.
of a bitch, he pulled my arms under me, and I couldn't move my arms, and you know that's
Give you
a
the
no-no.
ether, yeah.
Yeah, when they were giving him it, and the last thing I heard is he said, "Make him shut up" or something like that. I was screaming. I couldn't. I wasn't scared of the operation. I couldn't move my goddamn arms. They pinned
Now,
him
see, I
under
was
the
a good
sheets.
kid. I didn't object.
Boy, I did. Son of a bitch has nailed my
Well,
arms.
see, what happened is I was in junior high. I'm trying to think how that worked. Bob was in 9th grade, and I was in 7th grade. And Bob broke his leg in the high school.
Yeah.
The old, I don't think you remember the old.
Oh, yeah, I do. At the old high school, there used to be a running track up around the edge of the gym.
Yeah. Well, he swung out on a rope.
From one side of the running track to the other.
Was going to, yeah, and the rope broke. He fell and broke his leg, and
Long
they took.
way down to the basketball court.
Yeah. So anyway, he was up in the hospital for about a week or 10 days, wasn't he? But the school, of course, promptly settled with the family. I mean, you know, they offered to pay the expenses and give us a little extra to not sue the city or the school for having what do you call it, an attractive nuisance or improper equipment or something like that. So, but anyway, Dr. Spencer said, well, no, he said, the school paid me for Bob's care, but he says, I'll take out the kid's tonsils. So he took out, he says that Blanche has got to have her tonsils out. She's never going to grow if she doesn't. Gosh, I was in the 7th grade and I only weighed 60 pounds.
By God, you know, the whole tribe had trouble with them
Oh, yeah.
tonsils because they claimed on me, and I wouldn't know, but they said you didn't get started until your tonsils come out.
Yeah, well, I never did grow until after I had my tonsils out. I was always the smallest kid in every class.
Mm.
I was just a real tiny little kid. Very undernourished and sick all the time. I had terrible tonsillitis every winter.
That's an infection, and it's taking everything.
Well, and then even taking out the tonsils, I didn't get well right away, I had very severe complications afterwards.
Well, they didn't have antibiotics, did they?
No
Oh, no,
antibiotics.
there was none
No.
until after World War II.
But I spoiled the Spencer's dinner party.
Sulfa, they had sulfa.
Yeah.
That was it.
No, didn't even have sulfur there yet.
Yeah, they did.
Well, not when I had my tonsils out. They didn't.
Well, they
have-
couldn't use it then. You can't throw sulfa down your throat.
No, they.
Well, how did you ruin the dinner party?
Well, I walked home from the hospital after my tonsils were out. They kept me overnight. And I just got up and walked home. I was 10 years old, or 11 years old, 12 years old, whatever I was. And about 3 days later, I mean, I didn't get better, and I didn't get better, and my throat swelled up, and my abscessed inside my throat. And all of a sudden, I guess I started hemorrhaging, and Mother grabbed one of the big linen napkins out of the buffet drawer and jammed it on my face, and had Bob or JB take me over across the street to Dr. Spencer's, and they were having a dinner party. And he just grabbed me up in his arms and put me in the car and took me up to the hospital. And they finally,
Sorted it out.
I finally got the bleeding stopped. And after the abscess drained, well, then I was fine. So then they kept me overnight again. And then the next day I got up and walked home again. We didn't have a car or anything.
Oh, hell no.
So I still remember walking home and everything was just real, just very
Like
light.
you were on sodium pentothal.
Yeah, well, not only that, I was weak. I mean, I was
Oh, yeah.
very, very hazy, and everything just kind of shifted
Well, they
around.
must have done Keith and Kenneth then somewhere in there too.
No, the Keith and Kenneth got theirs done by the Mormon Church. We were so poor, and the bishop of the ward came over and said that these little boys need their tonsils out. They weren't growing either. None of us were growing. We were just stalled. So they took Keith and Kenneth up, and Dr. Harvey Hatch had just gotten out of medical school. And he took the kids, that was the old LDS hospital. And they took them in, and they were so little and so frail. They were, they were second grade, I guess, because I was in junior high, and I don't know how old they were. But one of them nearly bled to death too. They had a hard time stopping the bleeding. But, no, the Mormons were pretty good, look after us kids. Old Doc Lee used to grab us and look in our mouth every once in a while.
Yeah, he did my teeth. I wish
Yeah.
the hell he hadn't, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
God almighty, that was cruelty, boy, I'll tell you. I was a son of a bitch.
No Novocaine. Everything was just.
Oh, he didn't even know how to spell it. He didn't even know what it looked like.
Well, he
And
got
all these goddamn tools were dull and they were worn out, and the goddamn machine would go all over the room, and around the joints.
Hey,
And then you
what's
had
your-
this old thing that looked like an old shitter with the yellow stain on it, and you'd say, spit. You'd spit, and then you'd say, open. And then you'd say, wider. And the goddamn smoke is coming out of your mouth. I can still see it. And it hit the goddamn nerve, And it just everything you could do to keep from pissing your pants. Gripped that old leather chair, and you could see where the last guy had just torn the leather right off of this son of a bitch. Your fingers
I was
fit
in
right
that
on
chair
your
too.
chair, yeah.
Yeah, I was in that chair a time or two, but at least they didn't
Christ
charge us
almighty.
anything.
No,
The price was right.
the price was right, yeah.
Good old guy. They were
He was a
good
good old
people. Yeah.
The old Dockley, he was a good old guy.
I used to walk from his office his office was downtown, and then he'd walk by down past the old junior high and down toward he lived in that big house at the end of South Ridge.
Yeah, I remember which one.
Yeah. But every time he'd see me on the street, he'd grab me. Let me look at your mouth, little girl.
Yeah.
He'd grab me and pull my chin down to see if I had any rotten teeth that
He'd do
needed to
that
come
to
out.
me too, and then I get a lecture on
Brushing your
eat-
teeth.
Well, and eating meat was a bad one too.
Yeah.
He wouldn't eat.
You gotta eat fresh vegetables, he said.
Yeah, he was a
Yeah,
vegetarian.
lots of
period.
fresh vegetables.
He would eat bread.
And
He
he
said
said, "You
bread
just-
would be okay, but don't stop eating that.
And you
meat."
scrub your teeth, even if you have to use soda, salt and soda, he said.
Yeah, that's fine.
This is good. In fact, that's all we did. We didn't have toothpaste when we were kids.
Hell, I never had a toothbrush till I got to the Army, and what the hell one was. Well, I knew what they were, but I didn't know how to use them.
We didn't have any.
I really worried about all that hygiene and all that, but that other crap.
And we were lucky to get a
Jesus
clean
Christ
set of
almighty.
clothes once a week, weren't we?
Hell, yes.
Yeah, those were the doctors. I was sitting here with Lola, trying to think what her name is. Anyway, her husband worked out the side, and they came here, and she worked at the hospital. We were talking about all the old doctors, old Dr. Soderquist,
Yeah.
Dr. Klein. She said she still remembered working under Dr. Klein. She took her training. And Dr. Erickson, remember him? Big, tall Dr. Erickson. Dr. Spencer, Dr. Woolley.
Oh, yeah.
All the old, hell, there only used to be about 10 doctors in town.
Yeah, they had it sold up.
Yeah, there was the two Dr. West, they took care of the Mormons. Then the Hatches came in, and they took care of the Mormons. Then there was the other side, old Doc Wilson, Dr. Woolley, and Dr. Spencer.
Well, they were the ones that
Yeah.
went out and would play golf and stuff
Yeah.
when I came along.
Well, Hal, do you?
They were pretty used up.
Do you remember your grandfather? Do you remember old Jake Kiefer?
Yeah, I do. I remember he was living in a sheep camp as a goddamn
Night watchman.
night watchman somewhere, and I remember going out, I can't remember the car, who was involved in the thing, and he had some candy. And he had some candy hid in that sheep camp, and he worked it out so that could find it. And I do remember that. And that's not the stories of it, I actually remember that, and I was just a
You'd be
little
5.
son
yeah,
of a bitch.
Yeah, you'd be 5 years old.
5?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he
and I
died in
remember it.
41, so
Yeah.
he died just during Pearl Harbor week.
Yeah.
That week of Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
Is that 41 or 42?
41.
41, yeah. Yeah, I've been back to that old sheep camp too.
Yeah.
In fact, I can show you a picture of it in there with you.
I think it was
Dad's
down
in
by
there.
Mulligan's Beach, I'm not too damn
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, it's upstairs, right at the old potato growers.
Right.
Is where he used to be the night watchman. Right
Yeah.
across the river. From,
Yeah, there used to be one hell of a bunch of construction material out there, like huge beams and steel and all that. When I was in high school, it was still an old boneyard. Old machinery and everything
Oh,
else.
yeah. They've kind of cleaned that up now. It isn't, in fact,
Oh, it's all
yeah.
that's gone, yeah. In fact, I don't think I tried to get down there and you couldn't. They stopped the road.
Yeah.
So
well, see, they,
see, because when we were in high school, that was our hangout.
yeah.
Right up until high school.
Well, that's just that beach right across
Yeah.
from the power plant.
Power plant,
Yeah.
exactly, but there's no
That's where,
road down
that's
there
where
now.
Grandpa, in fact, we used to, I remember with Dad, you could walk across the railroad bridge, and there was only 100 yards or so to Grandpa's sheep camp there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
What do you remember about Grandpa DeLynn?
Well, he would
Blanche,
remember. He
right?
died the
Blanche.
same year that he was born. Grandpa DeLynn died in 1935.
Well, you should remember.
I remember. I don't remember him. I remember my mother when she got the letter saying that he was dead. Now she cried. It was sad.
Well, I got the pictures of where they planted him
Yeah.
down there. It's under Lake Powell now.
Yeah.
But
No,
I
but I
got a
still
picture of the very spot.
That was 1935, and I remember we got roller skates for Christmas. That's what we got, period. We each got a pair of roller skates. JB, Bob, and I got roller skates. And you were
Born.
just born, yeah.
I was born in 35.
Yeah, you were just a baby. There was, Alden was there with us, of course, and JB and Bob and Keith and Kenneth, and then you were the new baby.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of years in between me and the others.
It was
Hell-
kind of.
hell of a mistake.
Well,
We didn't have a bed for Hal, so they, I can't remember whether it was Pee-wee was involved or whether it was just JB and Bob, but they went and got, remember the
Some lumber and built
slats?
something,
Yeah, the
slats.
slats that you
Built
used in the plaster walls, plaster slabs, and we built him a crib out of it. And paid Mother, I still remember, she got a little can of paint, a little 10-cent can of paint, and
Yeah.
painted it blue. And made a little mattress, and that was his bed. That was the day I dropped you, and I've never gotten over that. That was one of those, I dropped you on your
Bounced
head.
me off the ground a little bit.
Well, you were too big to sleep in the basket anymore, or whatever we had you in, and so we made this crib for you. It was the summertime, and like I said, they were building houses here and there, and the kids scrounged
Go
up this
down.
lumber and
Go down and get to the lab, yeah.
laths and cut them off and fasten them together so that they were sturdy, and made him a crib. But I was out on the porch watching the whole operation. I was supposed to be holding the baby. God, I was only 9. I dropped it right over my back.
Right
on his head.
shoulder, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, I probably still got a knot back there, sis, or something. Yeah.
Well, that's a tough story. Well,
Yeah.
tell me about when he came with his family from Denmark or Sweden. Where did his family come from? John
They were
Walter.
Swedish.
They were Swedish.
Swedish, yeah.
And he had what, 3 older sisters?
2 or 3 older sisters, yeah. That's a story I always heard. But he was a, no, I'm trying to think whether they were the sisters or if they were the aunts. No, I guess they were the sisters, because he was an ornery little baby, they said. He'd get up out of his cradle and slap his sister, and he'd say, "Then you rock my cradle." She wouldn't rock his cradle to suit him, so he'd pop her one, and she'd have to stop and rock the cradle. He was about
Well,
3
they,
years
they
old.
must have come late into that Mormonism. No, I don't
I
think,
think so.
they have the push carts or any
No,
of that
not
bullshit.
not like the other grandparents did. Hello? Hello? Oh, we can come get them? All right, we'll be right over. Thanks so much, Vicki. Bye-bye. The dog's done. We can come this way, she says.
So do you want me to run over with you?
Oh, I can go get
them
him.
But you know more than anybody.
Yeah, and I don't know a hell of a lot. I just know that all through his life, Dad suffered under the assumption that his dad's family were terrible, horrible people, and they weren't. They were. When I met his uncle, who was Dad's uncle, was still living. He was 90 years old, and when we met him, he was just the sweetest, kindest man you ever saw. Just religious, never swore. He said, and then we got him to talk a little bit about Dad's dad. He said that Russell was just the kindest man that ever lived. He never swore. He was religious. He believed in God, and he was saved, and couldn't read or write, but he was still very, very good.
He was just a sharecropper.
He was a sharecropper. And he worked hard all his life. He just always worked hard all his life. And then he is this farmer, and I have his name written down in a book. I've got a book of the old Madison County where David's dad was from, or where David was born. It's near Greenville in Madison, Florida, Madison County, Florida. But anyway, this guy that owned this big ranch, and he's listed in this book as one of the founding fathers of this county and the pioneers of it. And anyway, Russell worked all year long, worked his living butt right off, and brought in a really nice crop. And when it came time to pay him off, why the old man instigated a fight and said, "Oh, you didn't have that much money coming, or you owe me this much for what I've been advanced you for seed and for cash advances, and so you don't get anything or something." But of course, he had a temper, and he got really mad, and I guess he threatened him, and
So he called the sheriff and had Grandpa put in jail. And then they had a hearing and they declared him incompetent and put him in prison, or in a insane asylum, because he'd had this anger, I'm sure you know how males do. I mean, they get, when they feel like they've been, and he had every right to feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, he was in the Caloosahatchee prison, her insane asylum all his life. He died there with tuberculosis.
His whole life? How many years total did he
He
spend?
died when Joyce was a baby. But I never did know that until that time.
We were always told that he died when Grandpa was 7 years old.
And that wasn't when he died. That's when Minnie ran him off. Told him to get the hell out of there, and she didn't want anything to do with him. See, then after that, before the incident where he was put in the prison, they had moved down to southern Florida, or central Florida, and he'd worked in the an orange picker, and worked on the big orange orchard ranches and so forth. And they'd moved from Fort Pierce, Florida, and over to Avon Park. And then when they were living in Avon Park, that's when she told him to get the hell out of there and ran him off. And the Brethren Church, little old church there, there used to be a lot of people from the north that come down to Florida in the wintertime. They get on the train from Pennsylvania, and a lot of them were Amish and Brethrens.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'd come down to Florida for the winter. And they'd bring their barrels of salted fish, and they'd bring their canned goods and their sacks of cornmeal, and they had their summer places down in Florida just like the rich people, only they were the poorer class. Although they weren't really poor, they were conservative. But anyway, they had this little church at Avon Park, and Grandma, they told Minnie that they felt sorry for her and her two little orphan children, so they let her clean the church, and of course, their big idea is they wanted her to join the church too. I mean, they didn't want them to support her and give her money, food, and a place to live and everything. They wanted her to join the church, and she got really upset about it and left. So then that's when she moved down to Sebring. But she was never divorced from Grandpa. See, even when she married her second husband, why she had never divorced Russell, John Russell. But she got married anyway. I think she later on went and got a divorce legally after she was married to Harold, but they never remarried her or anything. But she was always a rather shady lady.
Hey,
Her morals and her, she just wasn't too honest.
What was her background?
Well, she was supposedly, her mother was an orphan, and she was married to an older man who had one whole family, and then his wife had died, so he went to the orphanage and got this, was it Elizabeth? Was that her name?
I don't remember.
I haven't written down.
It's Barkley, but I don't know what.
Yeah. He married this younger woman right out of the orphanage. She was probably 15, 16 years old, and they had 3 more babies. So Tom Barkley was an old man at that time. He was in his 50s, but he wanted somebody to take care of him and what few kids he had left in the house. And so Elizabeth, she took over the family and had Minnie and Annie and a boy named Charles. And he died and left her as a widow, fairly young. But according to Minnie, she knows nothing at all about her mother, which would be David's grandmother. But David remembers seeing this grandmother when he was little, but she died fairly young too, and she's buried in over at Fort Meade. And when E.P. and Leela May, that's David's cousins, from his Aunt Minnie, or Aunt
Annie?
Annie, yeah. They tried to find the grave, and we tried to find the grave. We went to the sexton and everything, but we could never find it. it was evidently she was just, they said, well, she was probably buried in the pauper field where they don't even put headstones on it.
Well,
Didn't
Annie
keep
had
it
quite
there.
a few kids though, didn't she?
She had 12, raised 10.
Now about Charles.
He married and had a daughter, and they were divorced. And he was living with Minnie and David and Alvina at the time he died. And what had happened, they used to take these old Model A's and Model T's, and they used to take the bodies off and just have the frame, you know, and the steering wheel and a seat. Well, somebody had one of them over in some nearby town, and they wanted Charles to go with them to bring it back. So he was going to get in the back and guide it while they didn't have, you know, tows or these carts that you put cars on like they have now. They just hooked a chain or a rope or whatever they had to it and pulled it. Well, they were going along, and I guess they hit a bumper or had to swerve or something, and it just flipped him out. No seat belts or anything, and it killed him. He also was buried at Fort Meade.
How old was he when that happened?
Well, I imagine he was in his 20s or 30s because Dad was a little boy then, and he remembers it. And they didn't even have money to bury him, so the county buried him. They were poor. I mean, poor, poor, poor. Remember, this was down in the 20s and the 30s, and you know, when things were really, really tough. Same time that our other relatives were up on the dry farm trying to eke out a living. Yeah.
Well, tell me about Russell's family. I want to hear more about Russell and his brothers.
Well, Russell was the oldest, I guess, of the family. And there was Ed and Charlie and John Russell. And then there was a sister, and of all names, they called her Clifford. No, but Ed was the youngest. I meant Uncle Ed. That's the one we went to meet. And Ed and Charlie were just, Grandma said that they were still in knee pants, which was the expression for being under a certain age. Kids in the South never wore long trousers till they were 15 or 16 years old. They were still in knee pants when she married Russell.
And their mother wasn't she the one that was part Indian?
She was Indian.
Full-blooded, wasn't she?
I think she was full-blooded
Or
Indian.
half-blood, half.
Well, they said that she was very Indian. And after the old man died, and evidently he was an older man too that had married her. After he died, she married several times. And she married, and so your dad had a half-uncle. His name was Fush, F-U-S-C-H, or Fush, which would be a very hard name to spell or pronounce. But anyway, the old man, this Fush, seemed to have a lot of money, or he had money. They came to, David said one of his earliest memories is they came down to Sebring, and they were living in this little 3-room house there on Pine Street. I could even show you where it was if I was ever down there. But, and this old man and this lady came, and they had this brand new, shiny Model A Ford. And they bought it new. They bought a brand new and driven all the way down from Madison to see Minnie and the 2 little kids. But, and this is a horrible memory, and I even hate to tell you, I don't even know whether you want to put it on the tape or not.
We can take that.
What?
We can take that.
But David said he still remembers hearing him beat her in the night with a buggy whip. Just terribly.
But didn't know why.
Didn't know why, and she screamed and cried, but nobody did anything about it.
And that would be his grandmother.
That'd be
And
his
what was her
grandmother.
name?
Her name was Clifford.
No, that was...
No, that was a sister.
that
What was her name?
was Lula or Luella?
Yeah, Lula.
Do you have any
Lulu.
idea of any...
Lulu.
Lulu. Any of her last names? Anybody
No.
she married?
No, absolutely not. Only that Foosh.
Well,
She
that
married,
was-
and she had a little
Was
boy.
that a first name or a last name?
That was the last name. And they had this little boy. And David, they had the little boy with them when they came, and he beat her with a buggy whip in the night. But in those days, that was acceptable. It's just like, you know,
But you don't know what kind of Indian she was either.
no. I have no idea.
And nothing more about his grandparents.
No, I
He never knew this grandfather then.
No, he did not know his grandfather. By the time he came along, why, he was long gone, and Lulu had started marrying other men. Obviously, she got married very young and had John Russell, and then these other kids, and then the old man, his name was Tom, I think. Tom Red. Or was it John? I think it was John Red. Now, Tom was Barkley. That was Minnie's dad. Thomas Barkley.
But they were all from right there in Florida.
Yep.
Except the parts of the Reds that bailed out and went to Utah.
They were from southern Georgia and northern Florida, right in that Madison County area, Greenville, and there's several little towns, one called Lee in Greenville. And there's the beautiful little cemetery. It's called Pine Forest Cemetery, and we went there and saw all of Annie's family. All her Annie and her husband, and all of her kids had these gorgeous big granite headstones in a great big row. They all just went apeshit and bought all these big fancy headstones. A lot of them never ever ended up there, but they had their headstones there anyway.
Well, it's
Which
kind of
is
like
kinda
the
weird.
Egyptians with the pyramids. They were going to go out in style, huh?
Yeah, they wanted to have everybody remember them, but there was, and you can go right down there and find his name was Pascal Kaiser and Annie Kaiser, and then all her kids. There was like 6 or 7 headstones there of all these kids.
And poor EP was the last one, or is he just the last one you knew?
He's the last one I know now. I know there's a little lady, there's 2 left out of the family. There was 4 girls and 6 boys, and all the boys were alcoholic except EP. And most of them died horrible liver disease, VA hospital, down in the gutter deaths. In fact, Doris, when we went down to visit with her, the one brother had been staying there, and they let him sleep out on the porch. They come to the house. And they had a little house they built out in the backyard. And it was a little kind of like like we have these little sheds, only they build it out of lumber, and that's where he kept all his stuff. His clothes and his fishing rods and his mementos, yeah. Well, a few little crumbling possessions he had was out in this little house with a padlock on it. And he'd wander in and out from the VA hospital to jail and back to the VA hospital. And so, because he was always forever getting picked up drunk driving and, just being drunk. And he finally died.
But they're down to just two girls,
Yeah,
2 ladies.
yeah, there was Barnard and Colin. They both died of liver failure disease, and Barnard was the one that Dad was real close to. We always stopped to see Barnard, and they lived in Madison.
Well, which one is the one that looked so much like Dad?
Well, he's one of the brothers that died.
You know, the one time the cousin was...
That was Eugene, or not Eugene, Buddy. I don't know what his real name was. I think he was, Eugene's name, or EP's name was Eugene. This other guy's name was just Gene. But EP was he got away from the family, and he lived the longest, and he was the very oldest in the family. Now there's 2 alive sisters. One's in a nursing home in Jacksonville, and one lives in Valdosta, Georgia, and her husband is an ex-railroad man. He was just like Dad. And I've talked to her a couple of times on the phone. So all she does is whine about how sick she is, so you don't get much out of her.
Well, godmother, she's probably, pretty old by now. They're probably...
She's about the same age as I am.
But nobody was rich and famous, huh?
Well, EP came the closest. He got out of there. What he did is he married a little girl there in Madison. See, remember these little towns? They're just, everybody knew everybody else, and he married this little girl, and then he went to the service during the war, just like Dad did.
Only when he went to the service, he met this other gal, Jean, in San Diego or San Francisco or whatever, and he wrote back to Madison and said, I'm not coming home, get a divorce.
Wow.
And so that was always everybody's heartbreak, that EP deserted this little darling girl and married this older woman out in Seattle and had money. Well, Jean was at least 5 years and maybe 10 years older than EP. She was really quite a bit older than he was. And she had a little girl, or she had one boy, and then they had a little girl and it died. And then they had this Dawn, the one that writes to me, and he sent me this goofy Christmas card about how much he loved me. God, I've only seen him twice. But he wants to get together and have me tell him all the stories that I know, because he said nobody else will tell him anything. Because he knows very little. Now, EP used to go back to Florida every 2 or 3 years, just like we did, and he used to take Jean with him until she got so she wouldn't go anymore. And then he'd go by himself until Doris died. And then after Doris died, but he was down there, in fact, that's where he died.
Oh, he was down there when he died.
Oh, yeah. In fact, he died in, of all places, I think it was Corpus Christi, Texas. They having a big family reunion down there. And it was the Kaiser's, his dad's family. And all his cousins on his dad's side of the family, and I guess the 2 sisters that are still alive. And anyway, they were having this great big reunion, and he wanted to go one more time. And they knew he was dying. He had cancer of the liver or something.
Well, Jean had already died, hadn't she?
Yeah, she'd already been gone. But Dawn and Leila, or Lanny is her name, Lana, they took him, and they flew down there. And Lana has relatives in Texas, because this is where Dawn met her, was in the service, and it was at Corpus Christi. So anyway, he got very, very ill, and he was in the hospital in Madison, and they said, well, we'll rent a car, and he was too sick to fly. We'll rent a car and we'll drive home. They got as far as Corpus Christi, and he got really, really bad. They took him to the hospital, he died.
Do you have your pop out for your garbage man?
No, we don't.
I'll do it. You sit and I'll go do it.
It's too early yet, but...
Well, I can hear him.
They're
Yeah,
over
but
here on
it's
Pacific
it's
is what they'll.
But go ahead, put it out.
Okay, you just keep talking.
There's 2, they're on the second shelf in the...
Well, I don't know a good question to ask at this point.
All right.
Well, what's the favorite memory of Dad's family or Grandpa's family? Were they Hellraisers?
You mean Dad's immediate family?
Just that branch of the family.
Well, I was really quite shocked when I went down there. It was a whole different culture. I had no idea that the people lived like that. I don't know.
Well, in what way? Was it their materialism or their attitudes? Or?
No, they had nothing. I guess I don't know how to tell you. I don't really have any great memories of them. I guess the greatest memory is when we moved away and never came back.
How did they accept you?
Oh, not at all.
Why?
Oh, many thought I was just too highfalutin, and I thought I was better than the rest of them, and I just wasn't, I wasn't the good enough for. See, Minnie's first impression when we went down there was she sat right down and said, "Well, oh, I'm so glad you brought such a sweet little pretty wife back here." And she says, "Now you're gonna, David, you get a job, and we'll get Blanche a job, and I'll take care of all the money, and I'll give you advice." And see, we're all 3 going to live together. Well, shit, how long do you think that lasted before I decided, this isn't going to work? I mean, she wanted David to turn all his money over to her, and see, she took everything. Everything was hers. I mean, I don't care what it was hers.
Well, she was living in a house Dad had built before he went to the war.
But the idea was that when he came back, the house would be his. But oh no, it wasn't his house, her house. That wasn't the way it worked. He built that for her. If he wanted a house, he could go out and build his own house, see. She was very materialistic.
She was a bitch.
She had nothing, and she figured that anything she could get through any hook or crook or legal, illegal, scam, scheme, anything was fair game.
And she did a lot of that.
Yes, she did.
She had several, not one, but several slips in a grocery store
Uh-huh. Yep.
where she'd fall down, and she looked so horrible anyway that they'd pay her off just to.
Well, she did it on the Greyhound bus coming out here to see me. Stepped off the bus and fell down, and oh God, and she wanted a lawyer and everything, and so they immediately wrote her a check, you know, and she pocketed the check and left town.
But she did that several times in a grocery store,
And once in a furniture store, they had just a little step, and she managed to stumble off that and fall on her butt, and was in a back brace, and oh dear. Till after the settlement, then she was fine.
yeah, as soon as the settlement came, she was just a nasty lady. Nasty is the only word to describe her. She used to take all Dad's money.
Absolutely.
Okay, so, and I want to hear the story about how you and Grandpa met, but after you met and he left the VA hospital or whatever, then you went down to Florida.
Yeah, after he got discharged from Sun Valley, we got on, took a big, long, horrible train ride during the deepest, darkest part of the war. And most of the time we sat on a suitcase all the way from here to Florida. We spent 2 nights in Chicago because he came down with a malaria attack on the train going through Wyoming and Nebraska, which took 2 days. And then so we got off of the train, and the Traveler's Aid, that's something that no longer exists. It was called Traveler's Aid, and at every train station, they didn't have airports in those days. There'd be somebody, sort of like the Red Cross, that helped travelers.
Sure.
And this nice lady got us a hotel right on Riverside Drive, right on the heart of downtown Chicago, right on the lake shore, near the lake shore. And of course it was all through the veterans. I mean, we didn't have to pay anything. And we stayed there for 2 days until Dad got to feeling just a little bit better. And we caught the train again and went as far as Jacksonville and got off and spent the night there. And then we went from Jacksonville on down to Florida. And what a change. I mean, it was just like going into a fairyland. I'd never been.
Foreign country.
Yeah, well, it was January. We were all dressed in woolen clothes and going into this damp, humid, hot area. I thought I was going to smother. I couldn't breathe. It was just terrible. We got off the train there in Sebring, and that was it. We were home. Got a taxi and went to the little white house on Pomegranate Street. So, what a cultural shock.
The one that Dad had built before the war.
Yeah, right during the war, yeah. He built it before he went into the service, or had it built, yeah. Had the whole house built for $1,200.
Because he did the labor himself.
No, that's just what it cost then.
Well, houses there weren't like a house here.
Oh, no.
It's not like you had insulation and.
No, it was just a bare frame of a house with floors and windows, and the windows were just set in the walls. There was no, the studs were still in it. Houses were very seldom finished in the South. They were just as crude as they could be. I mean, unless you were somebody, and then, but normally the houses that you just built were just very airy. You had to. They'd mold and rot if you didn't. And then if you got rich enough, then you put what they call the like the sheetrock inside and finished them up. But ordinarily, they were just, a lot of houses were built that way.
So did you go down there with the idea of living down there?
Oh yeah, yeah. Packed my trunk and all my little wedding gifts, what few I got, and because it was during the war, nobody had anything or any money. You couldn't buy anything. I think Mother finagled me a couple of pairs of sheets, and I had a few little dishes and a few things like that, and my clothes, and that was it.
But you stayed, what, about 4 months and then came
4
back?
months, yeah. Yep, and then I came home. I decided I had enough of this shit, and I'm going home. I said, I'm going home, and if you want to come with me, fine. If you want to follow me, fine. If I never see you again, that's fine too. So I just hopped on the train with my little suitcase, or my little trunk, and away I went.
And how long did it take Father to follow you?
2 months. just so we could get up enough money to come. I came back and met Mamie Nelson on the street and told me, why don't you come back to work? You can start Monday. So I went back to work.
That was at the phone company.
Oh yeah. Because I worked there, I just worked the year before, but I only worked 4 months before I got married, or 5 months before I got married. But so I went back to work for the phone company, and I worked till I was pregnant with you, and then I quit. I didn't take a maternity leave. I didn't even know I could. They didn't bother to tell you then. They just as soon not go to all that work. See, so I just quit, and then I went back again when you were 2.5 years old. And stayed that time. That time it was stuck.
Well, tell me about how you and Grandpa met.
Well,
How that came to pass.
that came to pass.
She's got to clean this story out.
Probably. Well, I went over to see Uncle Jess. He came over here. Did he come over here? Yeah, he came over here and said, why don't you come back and spend a weekend? I was working at the phone company. I just started. I started in June when I got out of school, and this was in August, and I had a long weekend, and he said, he'd come over and he says,
You lived in Haley,
I
right?
lived in Haley. He said, come back with me and visit and so forth and so on, or I don't know how it was. Anyway, I can't even remember sure how I got home. Whether I took a bus or whether he brought me home or what. But I went over there and we went up to Sun Valley, or up to Ketchum, and I met this cute little sailor boy. So they were having a dance at Sun Valley. Would I like to come back and be his day for that night? And so Jess told me, yeah, that was fine. I asked if it was okay. This was on Friday night. So I they had a bus, a shuttle bus that went up. And I was going to take the bus up and then take the bus back. See? And it's kind of like the USO type things, you know. They had a lot of the local girls would go up and dance with the sailors and so forth. So when I went up there, I couldn't remember the guy's name. They wouldn't let you in the gate until you had a name, and I couldn't remember his name. And so then Dad was standing there, and he said, well, I'll take you in. You can be my date. So, hell, we got inside. And then there was this little, his name was Bradley.
You remember it
Yeah, I
now.
remember it now. He was just a dancing because I hadn't shown up. But we waited at different gates. I mean, there was 2 or 3 different ways to get into Sun Valley. But I said, well, forget it. I already got somebody now. And I already told him I'd go with him. So that's how I met your dad. So, and it was sort of love at first sight, I guess. So I spent the dance with him, and then the next day I met with him again on Saturday, and then I came back on Sunday, and then he started writing and calling, and he got on leave and came over 2 or 3 times before we got married in December.
And what was he doing in Sun Valley?
He was convalescing. He'd been sent home from the South Pacific. He had dengue fever and all his teeth were infected, and he had malaria. And,
Jungle rot.
oh God, he only weighed I think he weighed 128 pounds. He was just skin and bones. You see those pictures of him, and his uniform was tight on him. He got better.
He was there for a long time, though, wasn't
Yeah, he was. He'd been there since, see, I met him in August, and he'd been there since, well, before that, he'd been there for 3 or 4 months. They were trying to get him well enough to discharge him from the service. They couldn't discharge him when he was sick. He couldn't, walk.
And how did the family here react to him?
Well, Dad didn't like him, but no, they didn't particularly like him. But Mother didn't like anybody. Mother never really liked anybody, did she?
he? Well, that's true. I have to say that.
She didn't like any of her daughter-in-laws or any of nobody. She always had a
pleasant.
grudge.
Grandpa ever talk about his service time? Talk about his service time.
Well, he was in the South Pacific, and during worst part of the Guadalcanal and New Caledonia and Bougainville, those invasions. He was in what they call the Seabees. It was supposed to be the construction battalion. They're supposed to come after the wipe up and build the airports and the facilities. And he was a pipe fitter because that's what he'd been doing out at the air base when he went into the service, when he enlisted. He didn't wait to be drafted. He went ahead and enlisted because he didn't want to go in the Army. He wanted to go in the Navy. Well, in the Navy, they said, well, what did you do? Well, I was a pipe fitter at the Air Force Base there in Florida. And they said, oh, good, we'll put you in the CBs, the construction unit.
I thought he was supposed to set up fuel stoves.
Well,
cooking.
yeah, cooking, yeah, the whole, like I said, all the facilities. But anyway, the way it worked out, they still made him go through the basic training. And then they attached him to the 5th Marine Division and sent him overseas. Well, they didn't have enough soldiers for all these waves that went in on these boats, so they just grabbed all the CBs and shoved a gun in their arms and sent them out.
Told him he was just, now you're
Now a Marine.
You're a sharpshooter.
So go to it. But then after they wiped up everything, well, then he went back to building the Air Force bases and facilities. And
Well,
when
did he chauffeur the car in Washington, D.C.?
Oh, when he was a younger man? Well, that
thought
was before he ever went into the service.
Oh,
That was
okay.
just when he got out of high school.
I thought he chauffeured people.
No, this old guy down there, he was one of these traveling salesmen. He sold upholstery and drapery and materials for all these manufacturing places. And he had lots of samples in his car, and Dad drove him everywhere. I think he was Jewish. He was an old guy. He used to pay Dad $25 a week, which was good money then. And then he'd pay for his room, but he had to buy his own meals out of that, which was, he didn't have much left over at the end of the week. But he was supposed to dress nice, and then he carried all his samples into these offices and manufacturing places, and then he'd drive them to the motel or the hotel where they stayed and spent the night. And they went all through the Washington and all through Virginia and to all those textile mills and furniture manufacturing places in South Carolina, and then up to Chicago. They spent quite a bit of time around Chicago, and he's made several trips with him.
I thought that was part of his, when he was in the service.
No.
That was before.
That was before he ever went into the service. But then this old guy, he was sort of almost in retirement by the time Dad was driving for him, and he found when gas got rationed and things got bad, well, he just quit. And then Dad went to work out at the Air Force Base there in Sebring. It's called Hendricks Field. And but before that, all during his high school years, when he first got out of the service, he worked in a service station. He worked 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. That was tough times then. Everybody did.
And then Grandma took the money.
Oh yeah. Well, that's how he saved the money for the little house. And then working out. Of course, when he got to work on civil service out at the Air Force Base, then he was making good money. And then he got a room of his own in a boarding house down in Sebring. And I don't know where Minnie was living with some old guy, or who knows where she was at the time. She had this habit of finding old guys to work for her. She was their housekeeper. In other words, it was just a shack up where she got money. She did the housework, and he gave her a little money and probably a few other things,
As you can tell, we're not real fond of Minnie.
No.
Minnie was not our favorite. She's not your favorite mother-in-law type.
So, well, how come JB and Bob, did they sign up or get drafted, or?
Oh, I think everybody signed up for the draft. I think, I can't remember if they signed up or whether they were drafted, but they were very young. Gosh, they were only 18, each of them. JB went to California to work with, his name was Gene Vance, and he went down and worked in a grocery store in San Diego. And then when the war came, he knew he had to come home and be drafted, so signed up. So he thought he'd come home and leave out of Idaho Falls down to California. So he came home and away he went. He was one of the earliest draftees. Of course, he graduated in '41, and he went into service right with the very first ones. He had a low number, and they just took him. And Bob, just a year later, when he turned, his number came up, Bob was just barely 18.
Well, did JB spend all his time in the Pacific?
Every bit of it. Yep, he was in New Guinea most of the time. He's that poor, pale red, freckles and skin that we have. He just blistered and burned and blistered and burned. He was just, they were almost going to send him home because he just would burn and blister and peel and, ooze, and he just had a terrible time. But he stuck it out the whole time.
Bob didn't go to the Pacific, though.
He went to European. Bob was Bob was a very intelligent guy, but very quiet. And they right away picked him for officers training. And he was in officers training in Biloxi, Mississippi. And he was, well on his way to being a second lieutenant in the Air Force. And that's when they had the big push in the Battle of the Bulge in 1944. They in 45 they took all the guys out of they said, we don't need any more officers, we've won the bombing war. The Air Force had done their part. They'd softened up the whole European field, and so they just put them all in the infantry. And he was a sergeant in the infantry.
And he carried a bazooka, didn't he?
Yeah. Carried the machine gun, yeah. And they got him, just blew him away. The sad part of it was only 3 months before the war ended. It was in March of '45, and the war was over in just a few months. So we just got back a few little articles that he had, just a few letters and his dog tags and just a few little things like that.
Well, now didn't they bury him for a while in France and then send him
Oh yeah,
back?
then they brought his body back and had his funeral in 1950. You remember that, don't you?
The first funeral I remember going to was Betty's sister.
I thought you remembered the Aunt Fanny.
I remember going to Aunt Fanny's house. I don't know that I remember the
You
funeral.
didn't go to the funeral. One of my girlfriends took care of you.
I remember.
So what was it like growing up in a house full of brothers, not having any sister?
Well, it was kind of miserable in a way, and yet it was kind of nice in a way. But it was very competitive. It really was. I always tried to outdo them if I could. I usually did. My mother used to just say, "Oh, I waited all my life for a little girl. I got Blanche, and she's such a disappointment to me. She doesn't like to play with dolls, and she doesn't like to dress up, and she doesn't like to do anything. I was always dirty. They said I was continually dirty when I was a little kid. Dirty face. Well, God, nobody ever took care of me. And I said I ran around with my trapdoor hanging down till I was 4 years old. Nobody would help me button it up. We used to wear little coveralls with little 3 buttons on the back. You could unbutton the buttons and then pull them down and then sit on the toilet seat or the potty or whatever.
Sure.
But somebody should pull up your pants and button up your buttons before you went trotting down the street with your little trapdoor hanging out. Oh. But my childhood was very unsupervised. I just kind of grew up.
Well, Grandma didn't cope well with that many kids by the time she.
Well, you could imagine. Did I ever tell you? Have I told you before about Mother's life? when she was, here she was, let's see, she got married when she was 22 and had JB when she was 23. And by the time she was 30, she had 5 little kids, and they were all under 5 years old. JB was 5, and Bob was 4, and I was 2, and the twins were newborn, and her mother was dying of cancer. And grandmother Delynn had been her stalwart helper. She'd helped her through all her births and all
She
her
even moved
taken.
in.
Oh, she lived with her all the time, supported her. Grandpa never had made enough money to support the whole family. Of course, there was Frank and Alden in the family too. You got to remember, Grandpa Delynn was off in the Netherlands looking for gold, or whatever scheme was next on his list. Why, that's where he was, and he'd come periodically and bring what money he could, or send what money he could, and that supported. And Grandma Delynn did have a little inheritance that fiddled into her all the time from her family. They were wealthy people in Salt Lake, but they also had 22 children.
Mormons.
So it got spread out.
It got spread out, yes. Yes. Her father was a polygamist, and he had 22 kids.
2 wives and
2 wives and 11 children by each wife, and 2 homes.
But he owned a blacksmith shop and a grocery and a
Wholesale grocery.
wholesale grocery and
Yeah.
a little farm too, didn't he?
Oh yeah, Mary Ann lived down on the farm. That was the other wife. She lived down in southern Pleasanton or some little place down there, and the families were kept very separate. But anyway, that's where Grandma's Delynn's money came from, is from her father's inheritance, and she always got this little bit of money that came in.
But she took care of Hannah because Hannah was her only daughter.
Mm-hmm.
But then when she died, poor Hannah,
Hannah just kind of went to the winds. I mean, she just had nothing, no support system, whatever. And Mother went through very, very, very long periods of depression. Looking back now, I know that was what was wrong with her. I mean, she didn't keep herself up or her house up, or she did manage to keep us kids presentable, and that was her only thing that kept her going, was because she didn't want the neighbors to think that we weren't clean or well taken care of or well dressed or whatever. And that was her only the only pilot that kept her going, was her kids.
but she had not only the kids, when her mother died, she lost not only her mother and the income, but she gained Frank and Alden.
Well, how old were they at that point?
Well, 11 and 10.
Okay. And then how long was it until Hal came along?
Well, that was the really crushing blow. She thought things was all going to get along pretty good, and she was going to start maybe even looking for a job or some way to make more income. She used to take in sewing and do sewing for all these old nasty bitches around town that wanted their coats relined for $5 or $3 or whatever, and Mother'd work her fingers literally to the bone at night sewing with a light bulb hung over the sewing machine so that she could make a few dollars to feed us. Because Grandpa was working as a cook or a bartender or whatever for little or nothing, and half of that he gambled away or drank away or whatever. But anyway, so then here came, and right at the depth of the depression, I mean, it was bad. It was the worst. Our sheets had all worn out, our dishes were all broken, and our house was run down, and everything was really gone to hell. We didn't have an automobile. And things just couldn't get any worse than Mother got pregnant. that was the lowest blow in the whole world.
Well, that and the fact that it was a boy.
What?
Then it was a boy.
Another boy, yes. It was really tough. But I never knew my mother was pregnant. I was 9 years old. Mother kept it pretty quiet. But she made a few little baby clothes, and they did talk to Dr. Spencer across the street. Mother had all the rest of us kids at home, but by that time our house had deteriorated to the point where it was even sanitary enough to even have a new baby in it. And besides that, doctors wouldn't come to the house and deliver babies anymore. They wanted you to go to the hospital. So Hal was the only one that was born in the hospital. So when the time to have the baby, why, Dad called the taxi and took Mother up to the hospital and left her. Went back the next day and she had the baby boy all by herself.
So there's no such thing as hanging around in the waiting room?
I don't remember. I couldn't say. He may have, but I doubt it. Knowing my dad, probably not. But Keith and Kenneth went out. Aunt Fanny came and got Keith and Kenneth. And little Grandma Heath took me. This was the last week of school. See, this is May 16th, and we still had to go to school those last few days. But the minute school was out, why, of course I stayed in school. Keith and Kenneth weren't in school yet. See, they were only 5. And the 2 older boys stayed home and finished out the week of school. They stayed with Dad in the old house on Walnut Street. And I went down and stayed with this little old lady, this little Grandma Heath that she used to take care of me once in a while. She liked me. She's the one I worked for, you know. And then I'd walk up every day from her house, clear up to the Spencer Hospital and see Mother and the new baby. And just a little kid. I was only 9, 8 and a half. And very, very small for my age. I don't think I weighed much bigger than Darcy. Because I only weighed 45 pounds when I was in the 2nd grade. And I only weighed 55 pounds when I was in the 5th grade. So you see, I was a very tiny child. We were all scrawny little shits.
We can take a breather for a second. Okay, so you were talking about
Walking up to the hospital.
walking up to the hospital.
And Mother made me a little coat. And it was a little cream colored coat. It was really pretty. She was just a darling little coat. And I sat on some gum when I was out playing or doing something. And every time I went to the hospital, I always walked in and I backed out because I didn't want her to see that gum on the back of my coat. She would have just killed me. It reminded me of the time that I bought your mother a pair of real pretty little purple pedal pushers. Remember those, Laurel? Mm-hmm. And you were about the same age. We were talking one time, you and I, and about, I said, you know, I don't like people that tell me lies. I'd rather have the truth than a lie any time. And you should never be ashamed to tell the truth. And
Listen to this!
and Laurel said, oh, good. I have something to tell you, Mother. I ripped a hole in my new my new little pedal pushers, and you went and got them. You just ripped the ass right out of them.
She was not happy. The part about, you know, she'd rather hear the truth, that wasn't true.
I didn't get mad at you.
Oh, Bill! Listen to this!
I said, I commended you on your honesty.
Boy, I'll tell you, as the memory faded.
Now, I was always afraid of what my mother would say if I tore. We were deathly afraid of tearing our clothes, or breaking a bone, or hurting ourselves, because we were always told, don't ever break a bone, or don't ever tell us, because we don't have any money to go to the doctor.
Well, the only one that broke a bone was Bob, wasn't it?
Yeah, but then he broke it at school.
And so the school paid for it.
Yeah.
Well, they should have.
Oh yeah. Have a what do they used to call those nuisances? Attractive nuisances.
They used to have in the gym, up around the top of the gym, about 10 feet wide, was a track, indoor track. And then, of course, the center of it was the open part of the gym. But they had a big rope hanging. You could swing from one side of the track to the other over the, you know.
And the rope broke.
And the rope broke and he fell and broke his leg.
Shit, he probably fell a pretty good distance then.
Yeah, he did. Broke it in 2 places. But he didn't want it, he said he was okay, he was fine. And they said they noticed the swelling and they decided they better take him to the hospital, so they did. Well, I've got an article, I've read that to you, didn't I?
I don't think so. No, that's okay. You just sit there.
Well,
We'll show me the
stop
article.
it for just a minute.
No, you can show me the article
Okay.
later.
But anyway, that was quite a boon to us. That was right during the depths of the Depression too.
Well, what did they give you besides medical care?
Well, they gave us a cash settlement too. I mean, we didn't ask for anything. We were poor people. We had no idea that, you know. So they wrote my mother and dad a check for, I think, about $300 or something, which lasted us for a long, long time. That was the money under the mattress. The money. We had money, real money. And I think Mother bought a washing machine. And I think she even bought a couch too. We had an old blue couch. You remember the old blue couch?
I remember the old blue
It
couch.
was still, that was the blue couch we bought with part of the money. And then we just eked that money out for years, just a little bit here and there when we needed it. Bob didn't get much out of it. He broke a leg. We thought maybe they wouldn't take him into service, but it had healed enough that.
Well, they're probably a little less picky then with the
Yeah.
Japanese bombers.
He was a sophomore, see, and then he went into service about 3 years later, 4 years later.
Well, he didn't limp or anything, did he?
Not too bad. Nobody said it used to bother him. Broke through both bones. It was just a real bad break. He was on crutches for 6 or 8 weeks. Long time. We hobbled to school every day on crutches. From our house to the high school. Walnut Street up to 7th Street.
Well, was Bob always real quiet growing up?
Very quiet. Very just sit back and watch. JB was the extrovert and he was the introvert. But very intelligent.
Well, JB was no slouch.
Yeah, I think they both had IQs in they used to take our IQs then, you know. And they were both in the 130s. Way above average.
And then Keith and Kenneth, they didn't get along too well with Grandpa growing up, did they?
Grandpa didn't like Keith and Kenneth very well. They were mother's boys.
Well, he thought they were kind of sissy, didn't he?
Yeah, I can see now that looking back on the way things were then, I think there was always that homophobic fear that they were going to be gay, you know. But that people didn't voice that in any way. There was never mentioned it. They just the word sissy or girlish or was the euphemism for gay, and they just didn't. It didn't ever rear its ugly head or whatever you want to call it.
But they were that way from the time they were little.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. They used to love to dress up in ladies' clothes and they looked at fashions and they were artistic from the time they were born. As soon as they could hold a pencil, they could draw, they could cut out things, Mother was the one that, I mean, she was very nurturing to the twins, more so than she was to any of the rest of us. She'd sit with them and go through old magazines and cut out pictures and talk about colors, and hell, they were taking art lessons by Mrs. Spencer had them taking art lessons when they were just little tiny kids. There was an old man that his name was Frank McClure, and they had a shop downtown, and he gave them art lessons when they were very small, and they could draw things you wouldn't believe when they were 7 or 8 years old.
Well, didn't they in the first grade do the night before Christmas and do the whole story?
No, they did the Three Bears.
Oh, was it the Three Bears?
Bears. And they did them on just picture after picture on butcher paper. And then they had a spindle and they wound it between the two spindles. And then one of them would tell the story while the other one wound it. The 3 little bears went into the wood, and then, the mother bear and the papa bear in the house and the little Goldilocks. And all the pictures were beautiful. I don't know whatever happened to that.
Boy, what a treasure that would be to have, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, they did this whole panoramic thing of the Three Bears. And they took the twins around to all the schools and had them show it to all the little 1st and 2nd graders. They were quite, and their drawing, they would each draw a picture and they were identical. I mean, one to draw one scene and then one to draw the next and on down the sheet of paper, and then they'd roll it up, and
It was quite something. The teachers all thought everybody just loved the little Kiefer twins. They were just so cute.
It sure made it tough for Hal coming along
Oh,
with
yeah.
it.
For me, I was a disciplinary problem, and they were so angelic, you know. I was just really. Who's that? Come on, come on. Oh, mayhem.
Busy dog!
She can't get hold of that to bring it to you. She's just too excited.
Busy dog, come here!
Now, did they,
Don't.
so Grandpa shied away from them because he thought they were the sissy boy. Did they ever encounter any of that outside the family?
I don't think so. I don't think people paid that much attention to that sort of thing then.
I mean, Kenneth was the class president.
In
I
high
mean,
school.
they were quite popular, you know.
They
Really
had
artistic.
girlfriends, went to dances, and things like that. But
And they went through the war as well.
absolutely, the Korean War. They went. They got a deferment and went through their 4 years of college, and then I'm trying to think whether they went. Then they went into the service. Then they went back to Eugene and got their master's degrees. Eugene, Oregon.
But when they went to the service, they went to one of those deals. At that time, it was you could be in the service with your brother, right?
Right, because it wasn't. Well, they sent them to Europe anyway. They didn't even go to. It was called the Korean War, but they was in occupied Europe. They were in Frankfurt in Germany, and they were mail clerks, and they got special commendations from the generals because they straightened up the whole system of the mail room and had it all absolutely perfect.
The file
Uh-huh.
system and the organization.
Yeah, and then they were constantly confusing everybody because well, you were just here a few minutes ago, or we just gave you that uniform, or you know, I just told you that, you know, because there was the two of them. And they were identical.
Oh, so did they do that on purpose? Did they ever
No,
play pranks?
they
with
never
the
tried
fact
that.
they're-
No, they never tried that when they were kids. They were not adventuresome, very unadventuresome. They lost their adventuresome when they were about 5, but they used to, when they were real tiny, they used to run away together. They'd
Oh,
hold
really?
hands and run away. And they'd go all over town. They went clear downtown, clear down.
They were lost, they had each other, they knew where they were.
And they went clear out on the end of 10th Street. They clear out to Cape Curley Park. And God, they were just maybe 24 months old, just like little Jakey. But they had each other, so they weren't lost. They held hands, and they just walked across busy streets, and just went everywhere.
Probably got to be quite well known around town.
Oh yes. they
Yeah,
were
people
very
would come
well
and
known.
tell Hannah they had her twins, didn't they?
Yeah, Grace Kiefer lived out on the end of 10th Street, and she said, "Hannah, I've got 2 little boys here. Mother hadn't even missed them. She, you know." But every once in a while, I could still remember saying, and I wasn't very big myself, but I could still remember, "Go find the twins. The twins are gone." And then JV and Bob would have to go hunt for the twins. Is she out?
No, back door's closed. She's doing the squirrel, but
She was out last night looking
but
for
no, they were
toys.
real popular in high school.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And just a couple years ago, somebody that was going through their mother's things brought mother a class ring with the initials KK on it.
Really?
She said we were going through my mother's, I never did write the lady's name down because I really didn't see any point in pursuing it, but they were in Pocatello. Her mother had passed away, and she was going through the jewelry box and found this ring from this University of Idaho and the year on it. So they called up to the University of Idaho and they checked that class, and there were 2 KKs that graduated that year, and they were Keith and Kenneth Kiefer. So she called me on the phone long distance, and I said, yes, that would be my brother.
she says, well, you should have this ring. And they had it all polished up in a little box and brought it back to me.
But we don't know whether it was Keith or Kenneth that gave their ring.
Interesting.
Actually, when I got to looking, it was Keith.
Was it?
And see, I told her all about Kenneth because I thought it would be Kenneth.
How did he manage to not have his ring with him?
We don't
He
know.
gave it to a girl.
Obviously, he gave it to a girl, but I said, well, my brother, I said he lived in San Francisco, and he lived in South Carolina. You know, Keith had gone back to South Carolina to that Black Mountain College.
Right, I remember that.
And she says, well, I have no idea, but she says, it was my mother's jewelry box. So obviously it meant something to her, she wouldn't have kept it. But anyway, so.
That's only been a couple years ago.
And so you have the ring.
I have the ring.
How nice is that?
But,
That's cool.
yeah,
Very cool.
one of you guys can have it if you want it.
Wow.
There's this little box, and there's my mother's wedding ring and Keith's little ring in there. And it's in my jewelry box, so if anyone wants it when I'm gone, why, you can fight over it or
We're
draw
probably gonna
straws.
hawk it.
Yeah.
Think?
Hawk it and get the money, mother. Get a porno flick, you know?
There. What are you having, Joyce? A donut. Well, that's all the poop I can tell you.
That's
Well,
it? You're all
turn it
pooped
off.
out?
Grandpa raised Hal. Grandma didn't get too
Oh,
involved.
no. Hal, to this day, says that mother did not like him.
That's what he told me and Paul down in California. We just looked at him and we says, gee, we liked her. He goes, well, she never liked me, so I never liked her.
Mother was through having kids. She'd had kids all her life, and she was tired of it. Didn't want any more kids.
Great.
Oh, I did too. She was a survivor. She really had a tough road to hoe.
Yep, she was a survivor,
She-
absolutely.
How she ever survived through all that, I'll never
Raised all
know.
those kids and had all those kids.
But Hal was, by the time he came along, she just wasn't
Tired
interested.
and
So, and
had it.
besides, she went to work, and the day she went to work, Grandpa quit. Never worked another day. And that was when Hal went to school, wasn't it?
Well, no, let's see. Hal was what? Hal was born in 1935, and Bob was killed in 44. Dad worked right up till after Bob was killed. And as soon as Bob was killed, it was during the war, and no, because Hal said when he was a little boy, he used to have to come home alone. Remember how he talked about him and the little Jay Mason down the street? They were, well, both their parents were working, and they always got together and waited till their moms and dads came home from school, or come home from work. But no, Dad worked right up until after. Then when they wrote and said that Mother and Dad were entitled to Bob's insurance, which was what, the $20,000 or $10,000, and that was quite a shock to Mother and Dad. It really was, because Mother, when they went into the service, and Mother still to this day, until the day she died, never knew why, but the insurance policy was always in Mother's name. She was the beneficiary of his, what they called National Service Life. Everybody got $10,000 insurance policy when they went into the service. And so, but somewhere along the line, Bob changed the beneficiary to Dad. And see, the way it was set up was that if you got the $10,000 paid out over either your lifetime or, over 20 years or your lifetime, depending on which came first or at the age of the parent at the time the serviceman was killed. Well, by putting it in Dad's name, they didn't get it, they only got it for less than 20 years. If it had been in Mother's name, she would have gotten it clear till she died. But she got $50 a month for Dad's lifespan. So if
still
soon-
20, he died in 1964. So
Yeah.
Yeah, but he was too old. I mean, it only went
Well,
up
he
to the
died,
age
yeah,
Social
but see, when
Security
he died,
kicked in,
why
see?
then it stopped. The money didn't revert back to Mother, it stopped. So, but if it had been in Mother's name, she would have gotten that $50 for the rest of her life, for her full
How come
life.
he switched it to Grandpa?
Well, how do you ask the dead, you know? But Grandpa also took it real hard when Bob died, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, Bob was his boy. He was He was,
Parents seems to
yeah.
have a favorite.
So he quit work, and but Grandpa's the one that pretty much raised hell, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah. But he did work until after Bob was killed.
That was.
Well, see, that house was quite interesting. Whoever had built that house, it was, in some ways, it was very well built. The attic had good flooring up there. It was all good heavy pine flooring, and it had eventually they had planned on finishing it into 2 bedrooms and I guess a 3rd bedroom down here, and then a storage. The little tiny bedroom at the very end would have, with a little small window. Remember that? Would have been a storage room, and there would have been two bedrooms, and then well, probably 3 bedrooms if you count the one as you come up into the stairwell.
But the stairwell was at the end. You had to go from one bedroom into
Yeah,
another.
you'd have. Yeah, there wouldn't be any hallway or anything.
You'd
They just
have
all
to-
one open off on the other. But there was 2 brick chimneys. Yeah.
One at each end.
One at each end, yeah. The one for the kitchen and the living room, and then the one down at the other end of the house we never used. But actually there was a working chimney that went from, it was in the corner of the 2 bedrooms.
Right, I remember that.
The front bedroom had a place up on the wall with remember we used to have those round
Circle
metal
things.
things that covered the hole, and then there was one in that little bedroom where Mother and Dad slept.
But when you guys put the oil heater in, it wasn't down on that end. It was in the center of the living room. Up in that, it would have been the southwest corner, and you put the Motorola oil heater in there, or the coal.
No, it was called the heater-rolla.
Heater-rolla, and that was central enough that if you opened up those other little rooms, you
right,
got
you
a
could
little
get the
heat, because
heat.
that was it for the whole house.
That was the heater for the whole house. But that was worked off the same chimney as the kitchen stove.
Yeah,
It was
kitchen
back to
stove,
back
back
to
to
the
back
kitchen
with
stove.
the kitchen stove.
Yeah,
I remember
right.
that would have been. But I still remember Grandpa one time let me get and he used to set mouse traps out on the porch, the side porch that was enclosed. And I remember one time that I couldn't have been very big, and we took the mouse and it wasn't quite dead, so we took off my shoe, and I had black and white saddle Oxfords. And we whacked the mouse on the head, and then he let me hold it by the tail and put it in the heater roller.
Oh, God. What a memory.
I can still remember taking the mouse and putting it in the. I got to do that.
It got to be cremated.
Which is just you can talk a kid into doing anything if you just present it right, and
That's fun.
I got to do that. I got to put the mouse in the heater roll. I was about 4.
Well, we used to take them out of the mouse traps. We used to put mouse traps out, and I used to take them out of the mouse traps, but we just threw them in the garbage. We didn't go to maybe we burned them, I don't know.
But the real memory was the memory where Hal and I and Grandpa were all in the same bed trying to keep from freezing
that was
to death.
the terrible winter. That was a terrible, terrible winter. I never want that to happen again. What was that, 52?
Oh, God, no.
49, 48,
49. I was only
48,
about
40.
2 years
Hey,
old.
yeah, you
That's
were
my
very big.
earliest
Yeah.
memory.
Oh my God, that was a terrible winter. David got stuck up in Butte. It was 46 below zero. Well, they've got pictures of up in Montana. It was only 38 here.
Below zero.
Below zero.
Yeah,
And Mother had gone to Utah just to visit Frank and
Helen.
for just a few days. She'd taken off from J.C. Penney's. She was working then. And she was going to go down there and just spend a weekend with them and come back, or she'd had a week's vacation or whatever. And the trains all got stuck. She got stuck out at West Jordan, and she couldn't even get back into Salt Lake City.
And so Dad was in Butte, and
Yeah.
Hannah was in Utah, and they wanted you to just come to work and stay.
Yeah, they just said that and they would allow us to wear slacks because I worked nights at the phone company, and they wanted me just to come up there. And if I could just sleep in the lounge and stay, because so many of the girls couldn't make it to work, and they needed all the extra help they could get. But I said, no, I have a baby to take care of. I can't do that, but I will come to work at 8 or 9 o'clock at night instead of 7 or 8 in the next morning. And I walk to work. We'd get out, and our car was completely covered with snow. There was no,
You
couldn't even
didn't,
tell.
you didn't have a car then.
Yes, we did. We had that little old.
You never had a car till I was 4 years old.
We had, where do you think you was in the wreck? You were 2.5 then.
Oh, okay, 2.5, good
Yeah.
deal.
We had that old Ford,
Mhm.
and it was buried out in the front, out in front of Irwin's house. And we had kept old Henry had kept the sidewalk cleared out, and I could get out to the street and walk down the middle of the street to get to work. And I'd taken Laurel over to Dad's, and left her there because there's nothing else we could do.
Well, and the house was not exactly insulated well, and you had
Oh,
one
no.
heat source, is this old heater all you could make.
I remember the time the kids' birthdays all came at the same time. John and Paul and Joyce. So I remember one year, Grandpa he bought 2 chickens. And they were boiling chickens. I mean, old hens.
Yeah, they used to have boiling chickens that were just
And he
tough
made-
as nails. God.
He cooked them so they were just as tender as the melt in your mouth, and he made me a great big bowl, huge, of chicken salad. And I baked the kids each an angel food cake, and we had a party for all your kids. I mean, different hours and different.
Yeah.
But we had Joyce a party with her for her kids, one for John, and then Laurel. You took your girls. You took I think it was 4 or 5 kids, and we took you bowling.
Mm-hmm.
But Grandpa cooked the
I was about 11 or
Yeah,
12
yeah.
by then.
that was wonderful, wonderful chicken salad he made. What?
Oh, yeah, Grandpa had mellowed but he was the kindly, tell you stories, have patience with you, love you, pat you, be wonderful Grandpa by the time I
He'd
knew
gotten
him.
all over his drinking period.
But when he was young and had family of his own, he wasn't quite so pleasant, was he?
Well, he wasn't. But Laurel, when I look back, that was a tough time to have all those little kids, and Dad was crippled, and his health wasn't very good. I mean, it was rough. I'm sure he felt trapped. I really do. Life just wasn't what he thought it was going to be.
Well, he didn't get a lot of love and support when he grew up either.
No, he didn't. He didn't have a mother.
And nobody was rottener or meaner than his dad.
Oh, jeez. He was the meanest man that ever lived. Anybody that take the handle off the Victrola and take it to town so the kids couldn't play their little Victrola while he was gone was really cruel. Could you imagine doing that to little kids?
Oh,
They
God.
had this little Victrola and about 10 little records that they used to play.
That's the only thing they had up on the
Get
ranch.
on one side of the stream and throw food over, and the kids were left up by themselves. And one of the kids died. The other kids
Yeah.
were there. Isn't that special?
One of them died. One of them didn't make it.
Yeah, it's like, who cares for that old turd, whatever his name, Kiefer. He's in hell. Let me tell you.
Yeah,
But
one
taking the kids, the handle of the Victrola is about the
Kids.
lowest thing I could ever
It's a
remember.
special hell for people that are mean to kids. Let me tell you. Hell.
But Willow Creek
Hell.
used to get so high that you couldn't afford it, and he come up one year and he was in town for the winter and the kids were up on the ranch and he just threw him a bag of food over the,
You threw the supplies across the river to them.
Real nice, huh?
told him to make it. How long did he have the house? Did he still have the house in town?
Oh yeah, he kept that forever. I mean, I remember that when I was a little kid. It was still down
Well, what the
there.
hell did he have all the kids up on the ranch for if he had the house in town?
Somebody had to stay up and take care of the sheep and the livestock. He used to run, sheep. Feed the cattle.
Special hell.
Leave them up there and he'd come to town and whoop it up, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yep, that's pretty bad. Yep, Jacob?
Well, they
did come to, they must have been older than Laurel because they went to school down here. Kids all did, but they must have been 16, 17, you know, older when they were up there alone.
Well, I know, but still, that's...
Still don't leave teenagers alone all winter, do you? Well, supposedly he came back and forth. I'm sure you can read in those diaries where he came up one year and brought all those things for the Thanksgiving dinner. You remember? Did you remember?
I don't remember that story at all.
I think it's written in that little diary.
And what did he do?
Well, he brought everything. He brought bananas and oysters and turkey and all kinds of stuff to fix the Thanksgiving dinner. So they had a feast. But I don't know how long, but I think they were all young adults then, or they were up on the ranch. Well, I guess there used to be quite a few people up in that area. Do you remember that picture of Aunt Fanny and Aunt Bessie skiing, you know, with that group of people that have gone skiing? In their long dresses and their little skis. Hilarious looking. Well, I still think I ought to go buy one of those books before they're all gone.
Which book is that?
Over at the Post Register.
Well, we'll go
Early
get you one and call
photographs,
it your birthday.
Whatever. Okay, they still have them for sale, and there's the picture that shows Fanny and Bessie Kiefer and several other people on their skis up there. An outing, they called it.
Life was a lot tougher.
It certainly was. Well, and when you think about it, Grandma and Grandpa Kiefer, you know, Margaret and Jacob, they came from more than they had when they came here. I mean, a little more civilization and education and so forth when they came out to the wilds or the frontier or whatever they wanted to call it then. But, I mean, you can see from their pictures and everything that they were, and see, they're both Aunt Dora, great Aunt Dora, and Margaret were school teachers. They had both been educated. Of course, that's all the women used to could do, is either be a nurse, which wasn't really looked on as a very high profession, or a school teacher. They had both been school teachers.
Well, they could also be a lady of ill repute, but...
Well, that was, or a mother, a married woman, that was it. Or you could be a spinster and live with somebody else and help take care of their children and be the old maid auntie that lived in the back room or whatever. It just wasn't much. So when they got a chance to get married and come out here, they took it.
Well, obviously, though, that by Margaret dying so young, it may have had a big impact on the family. But although it does sound like that,
But I think
William was a little more refined than Jacob.
Well, I think it was because of his wife. I'm sure it was. I'm sure it was. And he may have, because she was religious and, you know, kept him right on the straight and narrow. And she had a little more refinement. I mean, they did needlework and she was better organized. But even so, I think Grandma Yo, or, you know, Margaret, imparted in Fanny and Bessie some of the finer things of life. Because you and I both know that Aunt Bessie and Aunt Fanny were, you know, they were quite ladies. They really were. I mean, they believed in order and cleanliness and, you know, needlework and all this
Finer things
of life, organization in their family and so forth. So
well, and even Bessie didn't get in on that much of it, but it had to have had some kind of an influence.
Yeah, because just like she wrote in that little book about her, when she came home from school and their house was quarantined because the younger kids all had diphtheria or scarlet fever or whatever. She said, my dear sweet sister had washed and ironed all my clothes and had them all ready for me because I was going to go stay with somebody else until the quarantine was lifted. So, I mean, that was, to me, that was quite something that Aunt Fanny would wash and iron up all her clothes for her so she could continue going to school.
Not only that, to create the good impression of whoever she was staying with.
Yeah.
Well, I'll have to get those diaries out and read them again, because I don't remember some of those stories.